Well, all right, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I want to say good morning and I welcome you to the 2020 CURT Workforce Development Virtual Summit. As you all know, 2020 has been quite an eventful year with the impacts of the pandemic, the collapse of oil prices, widespread social injustice, and a heightened awareness of the racism and injustice that have long plagued segments of our population. On top of all this, we're in an election year, and now our brothers and sisters down on the Gulf Coast are facing a hurricane. So please remember them in your thoughts and prayers. We're all facing many distractions as we learn to adjust what's becoming our new normal. And our committee has discussed the impacts of the pandemic and other events affecting us today and realized that while we're all facing unprecedented challenges to our individual and collective efforts in workforce development, we also have great opportunities. By necessity, we are having to change our delivery methods and processes for training, certification, and career awareness. For many of these changes have been positive and long overdue. Several companies and organizations have shared that they will not be going back to their traditional ways of workforce development. We recognize that the increasing emphasis and efforts in recruiting and training craft professionals to our industry is critical to the country's future success. We also realize that as leaders and influencers within our industry, we must act with a sense of urgency and create and embrace a more diverse workforce and culture of inclusion in our workplaces. We believe that today's topics and speakers will be thought-provoking, inspiring, and extremely beneficial to each of the organizations represented in this virtual gathering. But before I introduce you to the first panel of speakers, I would like to encourage you to refer to the CURT event app to review the speakers' bios, and you'll have access to their presentations. Also, please use the chat feature of Zoom to submit your questions. The questions for the morning sessions will be addressed before lunch, and the afternoon questions will be answered during the recap before we adjourn. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our committee's co-chair, Ed Lukenbach of Air Products and Chemicals, and joining him is Kevin Sell, Vice President and Chief Values Officer of United Group Services, who's also an active member of our committee. So Ed, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. I'm going to share my screen here, and when you guys see this, I appreciate it.
Good job.
How's that?
Good.
Looks good.
That's actually the biggest test of the program, folks. So I'll let Kevin. Kevin, you want to introduce yourself a little bit, a little background?
Sure, that's fine. Thank you, Ed. Kevin Sell, CVO Vice President of United Group Services, and have had the pleasure of working with Eddie and Ed amongst our other members on the Workforce Development Committee for several years now. I've been doing this about 30 years, so I'm coming to the end of my career in the next several years. But United Group Services, we're simply a mechanical industrial piping centered organization here in Cincinnati with an office in Louisville. We do work in the lower 48 for the most part, and just happy to be a part, to be able to help and provide some solutions for both the user and the contractor. So thanks, Ed, for that opportunity.
Yeah, and thanks, Eddie. And I just want to shout out to CURT too for allowing Kevin and myself to present some of our story, really. I'm Ed Luckenbach. I'm with Air Products and Chemicals. Been with the company for about 30 years. My role at Air Products is to manage our construction in the U.S. I have the construction and the commissioning team. And really what brought me to CURT was just a long history that Air Products had with CURT, and then also was pulled into the workforce development team. Really, wanted to work with Eddie to at least provide my perspective. So I do appreciate that opportunity. And again, the passion for me is as we run as an owner, I'm just really interested in, and I have to monitor the health of the workforce in the U.S. So this has been probably the biggest issue for us, along with safety, obviously. So we have a pretty informal discussion, but I think what Kevin and I want to talk about a little bit is just the relationships that him and I have had and that others could have, and a little bit of our story through the pandemic, just how we've reacted to things. So, and two things I'd like to point out at the beginning. One, CURT has a magazine called The Voice, and I took a look at it just the other day, page 14, by the way. So if you look at, there is a very good story about COVID-19 and how some users are reacting to it. I would really encourage folks to read. I thought it was a very well written article. Actually, we're going to hit on several of those points today, so it's kind of interesting. And then the second thing, there was a discussion on force majeure too, which we'll touch on. So I think it was actually timely. I think the magazine picked that up quite well. We didn't plagiarize at all. We did this on our own, but it was interesting. Some of the things will overlap a little bit. So with that, maybe Kevin, maybe you want to start a little bit?
Sure. So big shout out to the CURT Safety Committee. You know, when everybody was going virtual and you were trying to take real in-person events and put them into virtual, the Safety Committee did a phenomenal job in saying, hey, look, if we're in person, this may take an hour. If we're not, it may take less. And Eddie, you recall you and Ed and all of us on our committee discussion saying we need to follow that lead. So big shout out to the CURT staff and the co-chairs, Kevin and Chris, for leading the way, because I think I know, and when Ed and I were talking about this, we kind of wanted to follow that and put the content out there in front of you, get through it, allow time for interaction. So right out of the chute, we're going to talk about, you know, the COVID-19, and you've heard this in safety summits, seminars, any kind of virtual. If nobody's telling you that there's not a playbook for it, well, they sure as heck should have, because there's not. And we're all in this together. In other words, it doesn't matter if you're a contractor, a supplier, a user, everybody's facing the same thing in a different way, but it's the same thing, and it's a pandemic. And it came upon us rather quick, and a lot of us had to pivot. But we have found that with, as the title states, the relationships make the difference. And I think by the time, so the objective is by the time Ed and I finish, what you're going to understand as an objective is how that relationship made the difference and move things forward. So as a part of that, as you might imagine, there's other things that come into play with just not saying there's not a playbook, but what else occurred. So you have the pandemic, but what else occurred as a part of that? And I think Ed's going to touch on that with respect to supply chain.
Yeah, so again, from the user side, you know, we're all here to talk about the workforce. We're always going to bring that back to that. But, you know, generally as a result of the workforce, what we've seen as the owner is we know that we rely in our construction strategies on modularization. We put a lot of eggs in the modularization basket. And part of that reason is really to get better productivity and lower cost. And a lot of times we have to go offshore to do that. It's a shame. I think, you know, a quarter pounder in India is less than a quarter pounder in Houston. That's just the way life is. But there's other reasons for that, just because sometimes we have huge mega projects and we just can't get enough bodies on the site. And the way you spread that out is by using modules. So, you know, we look at flattening those manpower curves, and one of the things that we saw really is how critical modules are to that site construction. And so specific to this supply chain, we've had several modules that were stuck. They were stuck. They were sitting in shops. And so when you start to think about this, there's, you know, different regions of the US, different states handled the pandemic differently. Okay, the governors changed rules, school districts are all changing rules now. And so if you think about the global impact, different regions were hit. They went along their journey differently. They locked down differently. And so we first saw some of those logistic upheaval with we can't get our modules out of the shops. We can't get even the parts and the pieces, the valves and instruments and equipment to the module shops. And so this became a logistics issue. And I gotta shout out to anybody who works in a logistics or a procurement type capacity that's tracking material. It became one of our number one priorities because what would take a few weeks on the ocean turned into different pieces coming at different times. And so that disruption, we just learned to react to it, and we had to proactively really spend a lot of effort in trying to monitor every component and when it was going to arrive. And so you think about that part of it as a logistics thing. And one of the things actually Kevin and I talked about, he had mentioned to me in talking to one of his other clients, that, hey, yeah, the equipment's going to arrive and the boat's going to arrive. We actually faced issues that the ship's crew was quarantined. So we've had equipment that arrived at ports and we couldn't load or offload it. And so, okay, so now, think about the workforce impacting the need for modularization, another now complicated cog in this whole pandemic. And we now have active construction sites where we have an owner and a contractor and the equipment is not arriving on time. So, there we go again, right? It's one of the users and owners' typical responsibilities is to take the excuses away of the contractor and say, look, we're giving you all the equipment, we're giving you the work, the work areas, the open work fronts. Now the rug's been pulled out of us. So one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later, again, building on this relationship, is sometimes different construction contractual arrangements can really push you into a corner, and where you're going to don the armor, right? There's going to be a claim, there's going to be a tough negotiation, and quite honestly, the user is protecting our business, and the contractor is entitled to protect their business. They can't just sit around with a workforce with nothing to do. And so, quite complicated. Now, just adding on to this idea of equipment logistics issue, we rely on people, on bodies. And so we've realized that there could be actually a supply chain interruption with our craft workforce. And I got to tell you something. I had a chat with Kevin early on. We were talking about some other issues going on in the industry, and I said, well, this is great for the owner. This COVID is going to be great. I'll tell you why. Look at all these people looking for work. We're going to have lots of access to bodies, and that could push you into some behaviors that are not so good. So then, Kevin, I'll let you turn me around on that. All
sure.
Right?
Well, it's been really cool working through this, not only with Ed, but with the committee, because we've been briefing them, and all these things have just spun up that hopefully when you walk away from this today, you're gonna come away with saying, well, relationships, trust, and solutions are important. And Ed's totally right on the supply chain disruption. And I think for the contractors that are listening, and we're going to say this multiple times, you got to be solution oriented. So you can't just say, oh, well, too bad for the customer that the boat is not left China, or it's not left India, or it's outside U.S. waters. It doesn't matter. And it goes back into the playbook part that every port was acting differently. Quarantines were differently. And in other words, our rule of thumb was, if they tell you a week, you better be counting on a month. And this was back in March. So when you talk about the supply of craft professionals, and I'll ask you to look later if you want more information you can contact CLMA, or you can look at BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. So there is, with layoffs, with shutdowns, with pauses, all of a sudden, everything that we've been dealing with as employers, as a part of the Workforce Development Committee, as the overall CURT objective, we see this supply of craft professionals. But all of us normally, and this is a benefit of being in CURT, if you're in CURT, you understand that this is temporary. And if you really want to get into the analytics, I really like watching fluctuations in the beverage curve. And if you see the beverage curve from May to the one that was just released, you will see a quantum change, because it moves in two different directions, and you're going to see it make a quick, sharp turn to the right, which means that unemployment's high, meaning people are available for work. But this is all, when this comes back, as this comes back, projects are going to start, projects are going to restart, and we're going to have the same issue that we had just several months ago. So the caution here is to not think that we all of a sudden have solved overnight the workforce shortage problem, because we haven't. Education, training, careers is still important, and it's always going to be, but we have to be prepared for when things come back. And the contractor and the user both have to be working together to figure out how that works, to make sure that they're healthy, but that we also do not keep our foot off the gas of all the onboarding and career opportunities that we're trying to give to men and women that will later become craft professionals. So something that we got to keep in mind. Again, refer back to CLMA or BLS for that, but then you'll be able to see that and put that into perspective.
So, Kevin, I just wanted to carry on that. I mean, one of the other issues that we have is the impacts on projects. You know, we talked a little bit about the field, and obviously we're reacting. You know, my number one priority is to react of what's going on some of these construction sites. But, you know, if I look back over the last 5 months or so, we have construction projects, you know, that have paused and restarted. But from the owner side, we've also had a lot of projects that are in development, different layers, different stages of feed. You know, how do we look, to your point, how do we look at, how do we estimate manpower for a project next year, the year after, based on this? How do we know when it's going to end, or how is it going to change? We keep talking about the new normal. Nobody knows what the new normal is. And I think there's actually, after us, there's a couple good discussions on that. So I'll put the plug in for the folks. If you can get through our discussion, just hang in. There's some good ones to follow us. But you know, and again, local governments and owners, contractors, they've all decided, you know, at different times, different ways, you know, if they're going to stop the work. We've had a site, quite honestly, that was right in the middle of construction, had a couple hundred people on it, you know, maybe roughly close to a $500 million project. And we were told to stop. We had some heads up from the local government. And so again, back to Kevin's original point, no playbook. We actually pulled out our hurricane preparedness. We have a lot of jobs down in the Gulf Coast. And again, to Eddie's point, we may face some of that now, and in the next couple of days, it's the season, unfortunately. But one of the things that we did was we looked very carefully if we were to have a pause in the construction, just like we would with a hurricane. How do we come out of that? We know we're going to have to shut down. We know we're going to have to isolate and secure the site. So we actually took one of our playbooks from the hurricane preparedness and tried to adjust that. You know, looking at things like that effect of ramping back up and understanding the inefficiency there, a safety reset or a safety stand down. And to Kevin's point, you may not get the same craft. Now these craft are working, they're coming into a job site that's been stopped, and now we need to restart it. Look, some of this really just caused us to think more about, you know, anticipating walking back into that site. How do you do that? How do you walk in, check everything, and then bring the craft works back in? But even now, back in the engineering and design phase, this idea that, you know, we still have projects. So one of the things, you know, my management has conveyed to me was safety, safety, safety. We got to protect our people. Let's do the right thing. If we have to go a little bit heavy on some of these, how we interpret CDC and things like this, you know, we can have a long discussion on masks, type of masks, gaiters, and all this stuff. These are all the conversations we've all had. But projects that are even earlier in the phase, projects that are in design, doing virtual model reviews and hazard design, reviews. I feel, and we'll all end up in a different place in the future, but we've learned to maybe adapt a little bit more virtually. My opinion is it will only take you so far. I think there's a value in people talking live. But that supply chain hiccup with equipment, supply chain hiccup with people, okay, and then all of even the setup of the projects, back in the office trying to do a design, and many of the users, the owners now, a lot of that design, engineering, detailed engineering absolutely is being done overseas. So I've been spending a lot of late nights logging into model reviews virtually, and I think it's been quite effective, but it's not. I don't think it's the final solution that we want to really have here. So I think again, I want to wrap up because we want to really get into, I think, some of how we reacted here, but all of these things are really, the cornerstone is still our workforce, okay? It really comes down to allowing people to be able to be effective and maintain this business continuity, okay? We don't have all the answers, but I think Kevin and I think what we want to do is move into now. Okay, how did we react? The first part of this, and Kevin, I'll say a couple things. I think you can jump in then too.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
If any of the folks that have heard me talk at any of the CURT things, or in maybe after at the social discussions, having a beer, whatever, I'm a big relationship guy, and I got to tell you, we've all had different. We've all been quarantined. Raise your hand if you've been quarantined. I've been quarantined too, since May. We're kind of back in the office now, half time. It's been several months at home. And guess what? My wife has been several months at home. And, so this has been an interesting experience. So it's been a long, long time since her and I have had to spend, several days. We've always had a 5-day break in the week where she goes to work and I go to work. And so we've developed and really had to look at our relationship and understand the trust and how we're going to work together, and how we're going to adapt to these changes, and how do we put ourselves in a position where we can work together to address some of these solutions. Okay, we all know, and we all thought through, okay, I hate to say it, but we all thought through what happens if we really run out of toilet paper. Okay, we've gone through this. And so as this relates to the construction industry and building a relationship, in full disclosure, Kevin's company and my company have done work together. And one of the things that we stumbled upon, I think I've become more aware of this, is some work that we've been doing with him and contractors that he knows and that I don't know. And we've been able to really put together a project, but it's all really based on that foundation of trust. And unfortunately, a lot of what happens in the industry is we get tied up in the contract, and we're worried about claims. And again, we're putting our armor on. But I'll tell you, I've had a couple projects in the middle of the pandemic, some that have gone very well. Folks have been really willing to adapt, and some that were, it's probably going to, could get a little ugly. Kevin, you want to add a little bit to that, maybe?
I think it was the approach was that the successful outcomes have been where the user and the contractors are managing it together, and acknowledging up front that they need each other, and you can't revert back to contract language because that's just a complete and utter disaster. And you just have to understand that there's going to be some give and take that you're going to have to work to get through it, but that because of having no playbook, you have to create it. And to do that, as you go through as a user and a contractor or the team, When you assign those action items to handle things like this, you have to trust that they'll do it, but also hold them accountable and have frequent communication. And I think that kind of leads in, if you're okay with it, Ed, of getting to controlling the narrative, that ties directly in with what most of Ed said. So there has to be, or there had to be, and I think everybody on the call experienced it in some level, there had to be the message. And the message had to be, what are we going to do? And how are we going to communicate to the craft professionals? Because look, at the end of the day, if the craft professionals are not working, the user's not getting what they want, the contractor's not getting what they want. So what has to be that message? And then there's also the user side of it that they have to communicate upstream to various corporate levels to let them know what's going on. So it was about how do we give confidence? Because look, the craft professionals in some cases were worried, they were concerned, some were scared. And we knew, and using the example of what we had done in conjunction with Ed and some other applications, we knew that we had to be transparent, and we did not want them getting the news from the news, because that would scare the heck out of anybody. So being transparent, going live as a contract team to say, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And also making it local. As you heard Ed say, every application had a local significance based on what they were doing, whether they were quarantining, mask restrictions, it's all across the board. So you had to do the company message, and then you had to do the site message, and coming up with ways to do that, to reach everybody, that had to change, because prior to this, what would we do? We would do a conference call. We would have groups of people gathered around a computer or phone. Well, you couldn't do that. So you had to get different mechanisms of communication that would allow people to call in on their mobile phone and continue to be socially distanced. So it was all about controlling that narrative. And I think those of you that are probably sitting here nodding your head right now are the ones that did control it, to where you're getting the better practice out. You're getting it vetted because you're using CDC, WHO, OSHA consultation, and those of you that use corporate medical directors, you're engaging all those groups probably for the first time ever to come up with solutions, so that they just don't want folks like Ed and I talking, because at the end of the day, we have to have that clinical evidence to back it up. And controlling that together as user and contractor proved to be very successful.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for that. And I just to reiterate, it was a bit confusing. And I think we can agree that information coming from CDC and OSHA and others, we quickly decided that communicating with our workforce, on the multiple construction sites that we had active, both in the US and globally, and sharing the lessons in real time, and maintaining a certain consistency, so that our guys, our superintendents, our folks on the ground, they wanted direction, and we needed to maintain a consistency. We couldn't have people trying different things that were too far out of the box. And so trying to keep them in the box and giving them flexibility, it was a lot of effort, not just weekly, but multiple times a week, talking to our entire workforce. Are there questions? Here's some rules. We ended up developing a bulletin system where we can quickly disseminate information out to all of our sites with a quick Q&A. And then again, as Kevin said, maintaining a link to the medical profession. Okay, and then just again, folks, sorry, we got an election year coming up, but it's getting even more crazy with who do you believe and how do you interpret and apply these rules to your workforce? And users, at the end of the day, from my perspective as a user, what we really must, and I think we're in a position where we have to screen contractors. This is what we have to do, whether it's around safety, whether it's around their financial performance, whether it's around workforce development, and what are they doing to make things better, and really take that under their put some input into that. So we're looking for contractors again to come with solutions, right? We would rather not throw up the obstacles. And I know that there's this discussion we always have around, we all have our procurement departments. And again, I love them, that they play a critical role in making sure they manage the contract and put it together. But the reality is that you can have it all. I'm convinced you can have the strong relationship. It's going to help you in times like this where you have to be communicate, reach out to each other, have different types of conversation to make sure the project keeps going, and it's a win-win. And that really, it keeps coming back to that strong foundation of trust. And how do you build that? I don't have all the solutions there. I think as we keep talking about different type of contract strategies and how do we keep building on this level of trust. Kevin, maybe you want to add a little bit from your side on collaboration. Not sure Kevin, you still there or we lose you?
Kevin, you're muted.
I'm sorry for that. I had a bit of a cough and I was going to sneeze, so I muted and I didn't unmute to get back on. But and I know we're going to talk a little bit more. You're going to keep hearing trust solutions, innovation, more specifically. But I think when you look at everything that we did in terms of in the beginning, it was working together and saying that there's two sides of this that we have to put into the middle. So that there were things that you had to do in terms of, I don't know, just as far as solutions. And I think, and I was trying to figure out where we might fit this, but I was thinking more in the future state that there has to be more focus on being able to pivot in terms of something as simple as pre-mob and how we pre-mob surveys, more focus on staggered start and stop times, breaks. And I don't know if that was where you kind of wanted me to lead that into, Ed, but that's kind of where I was going based on the previous comment.
So I think we really want to get to the solution side of this too. And again, to try to get to some of the takeaways here. And I think Kevin, you and I can talk a little bit, freely about some of our experiences, but one of the things that I've learned, again, was having multiple contracts out there at the same time and different stages of the construction during a pandemic. Again, some of the sites being stopped and then learning to restart. We've had very good experiences with the sites that we've had the best relationships with. Not just a commercial relationship with, but a little bit more behind that, a little bit deeper, because I felt that we were always trying to put both the user, the owner, the contractor, that relationship, put us in a position where we can both work for the best. We're both going to run our businesses. We both have to make money. We got that. And we always are going to maintain the safety of our collective folks. Okay. We're going to put them in front of this. We're going to do the right thing. Okay. I think we're responsible and accountable stewards of that. But then, things happen. Again, we go back to the equipment doesn't show up at site. Well, how do we renegotiate? How do we, kind of remobilize or readjust the work site? How do we quickly get together and replan the job to the benefit of both? And how do we, if we have to cut our losses and compromise, let's go do that. I saw that as probably, quite honestly, one of the biggest, kind of a nice thing that happened during this of all the bad parts of the pandemic and all the crazy nonsense. But the ability for the workforce to want to work. This workforce in the US wants to work. I saw all but high morale during the whole pandemic. And so let's keep them going. Let's figure out a way to keep them going safely. And then the users and contractors working together. If you can develop that trust from the very beginning, from the development of the contract, working from the beginning of the project, front to back, we've really had some good results. We were surprised at how we were able to maintain productivity.
And I would add, and just from the prior slide, there's a question. Did you, those of you that are out there, did you collaborate or did you sit and wait? I'm going to make the argument that most CURT contractors and users collaborated or met or communicated and didn't sit and wait. Most of the failures that you see are people that sat and wait, both on the user and the contractor side, thinking that the contract would somehow, with everything else, force majeure, there would be this brilliant answer buried in the contract language, and there's not. And you have to be able to say, we're going to open up this contract, find out what makes sense, what doesn't, what do we have to change, and then in being solution oriented and not being afraid to say, well, okay, can we fabricate some of this now in the U.S. to help the user? And in some cases, okay, the critical piece of equipment that required a crane, a mobile crane of X is now coming later. So we now need 2 cranes to put this in, but we can build everything else around it. Does it totally require you to crash schedule and everything else? Sure. But can you still get everything commissioned and running in time? I would argue that answer is sure, but it's just all about making sure that you're communicating and that there's dialogue of how to fill those supply chain gaps, and then also working together on contract terms. That, if you're doing that, you're going to be successful. I firmly believe that, and I know Ed believes that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kevin, too. And you know, I think we could probably talk a little bit, Kevin, about just some of those things that we've done, you know, on our sites. I know, in full disclosure, you know, we're working on a project together. Our companies are working together on a project right now. As a matter of fact, you were there yesterday, checking in on things. You know, we can all talk about temperature screening and other things, but maybe a little bit of some of those active things that we've done, right? How do, you know, we've been able to take some of the workforce, maybe do some training and redirect them as now folks that maintain some of that, just the cleanliness bit was so critical. Different rule sets for how we do, you know, the proper face coverings on the construction site.
Right.
What did you see, Kevin? I guess, you know, in the last couple of days when you visited, anything that's stuck out?
So we have a consistently healthy workforce, and we've been able to, by a combination of surveys, pre-mob, restrictions, wipe downs, et cetera, and it gives such a level of confidence to the craft professional that it's really neat when you're there at the work face talking to them and them telling you, hey, we really appreciate what you all are doing, and using something. And so, but before you think that we skipped a bullet point, because we kind of did, I just wanted to talk about, you see the bullet point where it says discounts for open access work. I just want to back up and I want to talk to the contractors here. If you're not looking at working with the user, maybe the primary scope is yours. Maybe the other contractors don't have to work, and maybe that improves the schedule for everybody. Look at seeing what your possible productivity upticks will be for having open access to that work, and consider working with your customer, because if they're given a choice and they have to pause or pump the brakes a little bit, perhaps if you're going to discount it because you're getting done, you're identifying those cost savings of the less restriction, perhaps you offer that as a solution, as a discount to keep your crew consistent, keep with the schedule, and also make what I would consider a schedule improvement in pandemic terms, because you have that open access. But, you know, something that's been working really well, Ed, on this particular project and several of the other projects that both of us have, is that you have a wipe down crew. They're going across sanitizing everything. You can't really bring in well, I guess you can bring in a third party, but then you're bringing in foreign people to do a different service that can be performed by trained wipe down crews. Something that we noticed that was extremely helpful, and Ed and I had this conversation. So a lot of us have trained fire watches for years and years and years because we have to, it's the right thing to do, and you want to prevent fires and keep your folks healthy. But that same mentality If you haven't applied, it can be applied to health watches. They're doing the same thing, only they're looking for the health of the individual. They're looking for signs and symptoms. Do you have to train them? Sure. Is it extensive? Not really. It's more basic than you think. And those health watches operating under the same type of mentality as a fire watch really, really do prove to be successful in terms of total employee health. And that's what we're all worried about. So I think that was maybe the example that you were looking for. Wipe down crews, just as a general rule for this particular site, it's 3 a day after every meeting, and the crew just continues on a circuit, and they're trained on what to do. They're trained on what to pick up. So it's been very successful in our opinion. I think Ed collectively, as the group of the collaborative group of both Air Products and the contractors.
So Kevin and Ed, this is Rob Fisher. We have a quick question in the chat box I wanted to throw out to you. Speaker from IPA yesterday spoke about a 20% decrease in craft productivity due to the pandemic. Are Air Products and United Group Services experiencing that much impact?
I'll let Kevin answer, but I would say no. We haven't seen a great reduction in productivity, except unless we had an area where we did have, let's say, a flare-up. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let's say we have a construction site in a hot area, and for whatever reason, a couple of those folks do test. So if the U.S. is a big place with a lot of different areas, I would say for the most part overall, very low reduction in productivity, except for those hot spots where we've got hit. And I got to tell you, we did get surprised. And so let me just take it back to the relationship. Let's say we're working with a contractor. You know, look, guys are travelers sometimes, right? They might be in a hot spot. What do they want to do? Maybe at the end of the day, go have a cold beer. And so, you know, we're really asking them to stay within their team, use the social distancing, all the masks. And if you can prevent that, and it's hard for them, but if you can do that, and you can keep, as Kevin said, keep the team healthy, then you're good. Otherwise, it will drop off fast. But as a whole, we found very little overall drop off in productivity. Kevin, maybe you can see from the contractor side.
Well, and I think the question is great as it relates to the last bullet point of this slide. So I would say if you make sure that the question is not everything that you're doing to prevent COVID, but related to the pandemic, then I would say, no, you see very little. The only time that we've seen some dips is when we had to make some subtle changes, not because of a positive test, but because of a potential positive because of exposure. Saying, hey, I came back from my weekend, my grandma had it. Well, you have to pause that craft professional until you can get a confirmed negative test. But the health watches and wipe down crews prevent a drop in productivity. So I would argue that taking the investment of the prevention aside, the only other decrease that you may see in productivity is because you have to stagger start, stop, and break times. But I would argue that if your project management team, your site leadership team is working with the user, that there's ways to overcome it. And we've seen many of that. But to the last slide, pause in one is an increased productivity in the other. And what that really means is that you may have the same footprint with multiple sites, and the user may want to pause for one concern or another. Well, if that workforce is healthy, you might want to consider, if materials and everything's available, increasing to that other side of the footprint to get other sites either back on schedule or ahead of schedule. And then you have the same customer, Air Products, for instance, that has multiple sites. Well, if they have a potential issue in one site, how can you help them in others and remobilize a healthy workforce to get them there? And then you just simply have different sites and users, and that depends really on the collaboration and can you move the people in a healthy manner, and can you allow access or maybe limited access? So maybe you have 4 different disciplines working in that area. I would argue that you can maintain a healthy workforce if you reduce that to 2 or 1, provided that you can do it safely and it helps move the schedule forward. So at the end of the day, there's no secret sauce for saying, well, that we can do it. We're just seeing bits and pieces and being innovative where you can. I guess at the end of the day would be my suggestion.
Yeah, there's one last point. I think having your contractor have a crew or multiple crews sitting in a hotel, quarantined in some city, waiting on COVID-19 results is about the worst spot you can put yourself in. We're going to get shut down by a governor. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't do too much about that. And so really, I think Kevin kind of hinted on it a bit. You know, I pushed back a little bit when I heard about some of the requirements that we wanted for our folks to wear N95 masks while they were trying to do, you know, tighten a flange, right? Some of that precaution, if we do it the right way, some of the steps that Kevin and Kevin's team have done, being putting some effort in, being proactive to keep your, and look, as an owner, I'm looking to see, you know, if I see folks like Kevin's team really being proactive, trying to keep their workforce healthy, that's an indication to me that they're going to spend a little bit extra to stay ahead of this, so that they don't lose a whole crew sitting in a hotel room for 14 days. That's where you get the loss of productivity, and we really tried to avoid that. We've had very little situations where that productivity hit. I hope that answers the question. Maybe.
I think that if there's any additional questions, we can try to do that towards the end, and certainly reach out to the CURT staff and they can get those to Ed and I. And then, Ed, if we can, maybe we just go to the last slide and try to put a bow on it.
Yeah, I think so. Again, we can have a long discussion on what the new normal is. I don't want to get into those details. We can all, but just closing out a little bit, you know, Kevin and I are really both here because of our relationship with CURT. We spoke a little bit about a project that we worked together on, and just a shout out to CURT and to his company and his team, who actually approached me as a user and said, we got an idea for a project. And that whole arrangement was really based on relationship. And the first part of that relationship, to get that relationship going, was trust. And that type of an arrangement, from an owner's perspective, absolutely has proven benefits on at least one job. And we hope to do that a little bit more in the future.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's that collaboration and open-mindedness for new execution strategies that we think that where the industry is going to end up. And Ed, I don't know if you want me to just kind of summarize the final bullet points, and if you want to chime
Sure.
in. Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You know, when we talked a little bit about it in the beginning, there cannot be an expectation of the assuming that the same crew is going to return to a paused site for whatever reason. If the crew gets paused and they go out somewhere and they're exposed, they're not going to come back. Contractors may be using them somewhere else. So I would encourage users that need to pause particular one site, if you got an opportunity at another, that you may want to keep those same folks there. But it's a reality. In some cases, that's not going to happen. But also, you need to be able to, when you remobilize, you need to be willing to work together to give it some extra time because of what's involved in terms of health surveys and redeployment. And then also, and Ed, you can circle back around to this, but exploring aspects of force majeure, making sure it's not exploited, because look, we've all seen it in our contracts for many, many years. Rarely has anyone used them. I guess there are a few, but not certainly for pandemic. It's always been in there like an act of God. Well, what in the world does that mean? But it's be realistic about it and do some cooperative planning for the next one. Or if this thing lingers, and talking between user and contractor, hey, if this happens again, what worked, what didn't, how are we going to do it? But having that shared concern and moral obligation for total employee health. And that's really what I think, Ed and I both think that's kind of the return to normal. Some of those have been better practices, but it's going to be a must moving forward.
Yeah, and I would finish by saying, look, you know, again, I know we're running a little bit over, but, you know, just to thank CURT and thank Kevin and giving us this opportunity. I would say make lemons out of lemon, lemonade here a little bit. Let's look at some of these things, the trust building, some of the things we learned of the pandemic, and let's really look and see what we can use those, how we use that in the future. How can we collaborate a little bit better? So, Kevin, I think, we wish I could have a couple more hours to bloviate about the subject, but we need to probably move on here a little bit. But Kevin, thank you. I appreciate the help, and all the folks at CURT. Eddie, thanks for the opportunity. And then, we can take a couple questions. I don't know if we want to do that now or do that a little bit later, but
let's try to hold. Since we're running a little over, why don't we hold questions to when we adjourn for lunch? Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Eddie.
Y'all did a great job. Thank y'all for sharing that case studies. A lot to learn there, and I'm sure there can be a lot of questions generated as well. So we're ready to move on to our next session. We've changed gears a little bit. We're able to talk about how contractor and owner is able to successfully navigate the challenges pandemics facing on the work site. And I'm sure the preparations have to be made of the workforce. Now we're going to talk about the innovations and changes having to be made in our training mechanisms and processes. There's a lot. I think you'll find this is going to be very beneficial. Our next session is titled Maintaining the Momentum and the New Normal. Jennifer Wilkerson with the NCCER and Travis Bovard with Alliance Safety Council, and also Mark Benequisto with the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Millwrights Training Center of Impact and Policies. We're going to be sharing with us the different aspects that they're having to incorporate for dealing with the pandemic. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
There we go. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Good, yes.
Sorry, I started talking, I was on mute. The Zoom, the new normal is that you're on mute half the time. So I'm here representing NCCR, and I'm going to talk a little bit. What I've been asked to talk about specifically is just from a school perspective and what we're seeing, and provide you all with a little bit of information. And so the first thing I'll talk about is just a little bit about NCCR. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm pretty sure most people are familiar with us, but we do offer a comprehensive workforce development system. And what that means is there's a lot of aspects in that. There's accreditation, there's a rigorous accreditation. And the reason that I mention these is because they affect the schools. So the accreditation process, just making sure that the organizations or schools that are instructing curriculum are doing it in the way that we need them to do it from an industry perspective, whether that means their resources, their tools, their instructor certification, offering training to their instructors. We know that a lot of times, especially in a high school setting, that we might have someone that is a retired person or someone that worked just in residential, or they might have a different background. So we want to make sure that the instructors are certified and they have someone to go to ask questions. So advisory boards are crucial, having industry participate there. And then we do offer the standardized industry-driven curricula. So we have over 70 different craft areas. And when we design this, we design our curriculum with subject matter experts so that it does meet the DOL Office of Apprenticeship hours, 144 classroom hours, 2,000 OJT, but we also design it so that it's at a module level, so that people can pick and choose and custom book build, and still, as they're accredited, have their students put into our registry. So all that training becomes a transcript. And so one of the reasons I think this is important, as we look to the future and we start talking about online training more and what that looks like, we have to have bite-sized pieces of curriculum. And again, we've been at the modular level. We're looking at how do we represent that better and really give the students, whether that's a high school, a community college, association, community program, how do we represent that better? Also with this, as I mentioned, we do have our industry recognized credentials and certifications. And so what exactly does that mean? If someone's going through training, they're accumulating their credentials on the training side of the house. We have assessments for those who are already experienced, have been in the industry for 4 or more years, and they're going to sit for a knowledge test, or they're going to sit for performance, or they're going to do both so that they can get certified. When we're looking at the schools, again, talking about that, the credentials are really important because they can be at that micro level, at that modular level, so that students, as they progress, even whether that's online, we can capture the pieces that they've already been through in a meaningful way without having to set it out completely as an apprenticeship style program if that's not what is feasible in the environment that they're being taught in. Finally, a lot of you are familiar, I always talk about our Build Your Future program. It's very dear to my heart, getting out and recruiting, and I'm going to mention a little bit about that. And then finally, just on this slide, in case there was anyone not familiar with us, we are in over 5,000 training and locations and schools across the United States. And those schools and training locations are under 750 accredited organizations, again, that apply for the accreditation, that understand the standardized process, that make sure all the training programs under them meet those requirements that are asked for within CCR in order to provide credentials and certifications. So let's get directly into COVID response. Thank you. Travis is handling this for us, and he's doing a great job, so I appreciate you doing that. The COVID response, helping our schools. So what happened in March for us more than anything were the high schools that were calling us. The high schools were saying, what are we going to do? We have seniors, we have programs that are going to be ending. How do we help our students? So there were several things that we did. First of all, we worked with our publishing partner, Pearson, and we made sure that our NCCR Connect, which is our online curriculum, offers interactivity. It's in the Pearson MyLab. So there's concept checks, there's videos, there's a way to do an instructor-led course online. It was already available. We've had this for a long time. The interesting thing is so many people didn't really know about it. And I don't think we did a really good job as NCCR touting this ability that we had with online. So we made sure that this was free to the schools so they could get through the school year. Pearson let us know that there were 784 accounts that participated with over 2,000 programs under that. And I do know that access codes for students, they gave out approximately 62,000 codes, of which about 25% were actually utilized. Reason being, a lot of schools still didn't go back, and they got the codes in advance, but they weren't sure how their school year was going to finish out. And some of them have even pushed it. They had pushed it to summertime, they had pushed it to the fall. So that's why we're seeing that. NCCR also offers an online testing system, and we did provide just under 23,000, as you can see, free tests in the online testing system. What was really interesting and we really scrambled for was remote proctoring. We had not done testing because we want our tests to be proctored. We want to make sure that the integrity of the tests stay there, that we're watching that. We had not had remote proctoring, so we scrambled and we offered a remote proctoring program. And what we found out was the teachers were so appreciative to have someone else share the responsibility of helping the students get through the knowledge portion of their test. This, unfortunately, or fortunately, doesn't make up for the hands-on portion, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Is that's one of the things that the career and technical education teachers have asked a lot about, is how do we do the performance side? And so we are addressing that. Certainly simulation and AR and VR will be able to assist for practice, but ultimately in our industry, just as the healthcare industry has said, just as automotive has said, we still need that hands-on portion. And I'll talk about what students are saying about that too. But with remote proctoring, last thing on this is just that we are looking at AI, artificial intelligence, and ways to expand this remote proctoring and really look at it as the future for online curriculum and ending in tests, that we can make sure that people are guided through that process. We also provided instructional support. So a lot of you probably know, we had a lot of teachers that were like, I don't even know the difference between Zoom and GoTo and Skype. I don't know how to use it, and I certainly haven't taught online before. So we created a virtual training page, and we tried to put as much information as we could, even comparisons to the different software tools they might use. We've even created a tech support page because we found that a lot of people may even have trouble. How do I clear my cache? How do I open multiple browsers? So NCCR wanted to make sure that this information is there to support instructors. And I would say if you have instructors and they're going to online, do not make any assumptions as far as the ability level of them. You do need to provide support that may be a step back for you. It may be your IT department getting involved more. We took our IT department, we looked at what our calls were predominantly about with struggles for IT, and we had them go out and find videos and information. We compiled it and we provided it because we've found in surveys, not even us, but national surveys, that 87% of the teacher's time was spent in how do I operate technology? How am I able to do this? So just very important things. There's some other information about webinars and things we did. And finally, we really started talking to one-stops. We talked to some of our organizations that already do fast track to employment programs. And we said, we need to start with our core, and we need to get our programs into a fast track 4-week or less program so that people can at least get some basis. They can get interested in construction, because as difficult a time as this is right now, it's also the opportunity for construction to realize we need those people that are looking for somewhere new to start, that are looking to get skills. We want them to come to construction. And although certainly many of the firms right now have their own furloughed people and they need to get them back to work first, we cannot let ourselves slip behind and try to play catch up again like we've seen ourselves from the last recession that happened. We have to be proactive. So it's looking at our programs and getting them in that format. We're super excited to release suggested calendars and formats and how to do things in a standardized format, but a little bit quicker. And you'll hear more about our fast track program coming in the future. So a little bit like I said, I was asked to do for this is to kind of fill in what education is seeing. So teachers, there was a great survey put out by Education Week in June, and this is what teachers are saying about online learning and how they're having to teach. 64% of them said they are using a mix of online and in person, especially when it comes to career and tech ed, and that they will continue to do this as much as their school districts allow them to do because they feel that that's important. Also, 57% are already expecting budget cuts. So just to put it out there, schools already know this is happening. This was in June. More than half are expecting it. And then finally, 59%. So we heard a lot about the tech issues and we heard about internet concerns and students not having it. But 59% of the teachers on this survey said on top of that, a problem is students are having to share devices. So are the people that are going through training at your organization or schools that you work with sharing devices and making sure that our instructors' expectations and what we're planning keeps that in mind? They may be sharing with a family member, with a friend, if they do have internet. And then finally, what are students talking about? So this was Top Hat put out this survey. They surveyed approximately 3,000 students across the United States. Over 75% said the difficulty in adjusting is the lack of face-to-face contact. They want the face-to-face, and this is what I had mentioned earlier. As we know, it has to be safely. We know we have to make adjustments in our labs, in our performance, wherever that may be going on, but students are craving. And as much as we think all they want is online, this is not true. This is students want that interaction, and so career and technical education can offer that safely in labs. Another fact that they had here was over 77% said that the online training they are currently getting is lacking engagement. So we have to focus on how do we, if we're going to provide construction in this format, how do we engage the students in that? So just some information, wanted to provide you with those survey results, and it will all be here for you to access going forward. And then finally, I will say with this, look, as I mentioned before, opportunity is knocking. So what's happening here is our mantra that we've been saying for years and years about, it's about the skills, it's not about the degrees. Guess what? Everyone's jumping on board, just like back in 2011 when Harvard jumped on board about maybe the American school system needed to make some changes, and it was about skills. Now we've got Google talking about it, that degrees are not for everyone. We've got to give training in different ways. It's got to be about the skills. And then this top quote, I sat on a fantastic Reimagining the Community College System. Opportunity America did this, and they too were talking about how community colleges have to get in touch with their local industry, and they have to provide these quick start programs. And we also have to think about funding for those programs. Pell Grants cannot be just for longer term programs. They have to be for adult education and those that are in community colleges. So great information there. I encourage you to look at that. And then, so I put in here carpe diem, right? So seize the day. Let's make sure that we're engaging our current workforce. Let's make sure that we're helping them career build. If you need to assess them, this is one of the things that NCCR really feels is a tool that has great success when it's utilized, is assess them. And then those training prescriptions that say, okay, here's how they did, but here's the areas they could be upskilled in. We have to focus on that for our incumbent workforce so that we keep them and we don't see them leave like we did during the recession. We want them to come back, even if they're furloughed right now. Let's give them opportunities to succeed. Then we have to provide future training, as I said, in different formats that work for employers and that work for students. We have to have bite size, and we also have to have apprenticeship. We have to do blended learning. We have to have that online portion that students can go to that's engaging, that keeps them interested. And then we have to have the in-class time spent on the really cool stuff, and that's the doing, right? That's the lab time, that's the performance. We have to engage community colleges, community programs that are out there servicing so many of our faith-based and other organizations and high schools. And we have to be there to be on their advisory councils as we come back from this. If we miss this opportunity, we are going to find ourselves back in the same situation that we've been in, trying to pull people into construction. Wouldn't it be great if instead people are lining up at our doors like they are for healthcare or for other industries? Let us be that industry, and we have to support career and technical education. I would say get involved with ACTE, get involved with advanced CTE, get involved with Skills USA. They need support for the legislation that helps these career and tech programs continue to go. And then I think my last slide, as I close out here, it's always going to be about build your future and talking to you about, I know it's hard to recruit in a time where you're trying to take care of your current employees. What I would say to this is, it's important to build a pipeline. It's important to connect with your schools right now. Even if you can't hire people now from those programs, we have to continue to talk about construction is a fantastic industry to come into. We have lots of things that you can do here. And this October, we had planned on trying to get contractors across America in classrooms from October 19th through the 23rd. We've changed it up a little bit. We have this pledge going on where we're giving tips and resources for you to do that virtually. We're looking for great young craft pros to do video interviews with us. So if you have someone, please let us know, because we are going to put it in classrooms. We're reaching out to our teachers and we're saying, we're going to provide you with links that we want you to spend a little bit of time in October showing this even to your general classes. Let them know about the successful careers in construction. We are an essential industry. We're still here. We're offering all kinds of scholarships for schools, for programs, in the hopes that they will look at this and they will see that construction's here for them. We are the ones still working, and they're ones building their communities and willing to rebuild the workforce. So hopefully I've given you some tips or information. I'm happy to help anybody and provide information as much as I can on these topics. They're dear to my heart.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. That was fantastic. And I know NCCR has been a long-time partner of industry, and thank you for that information. I'm going to give you a quick, just a quick overview of Alliance Safety Council. I'm Travis Broussard. I'm the Vice President of Business Development. And Alliance, these are the industries that we specifically serve for all of our compliance, safety, and career development training in the petrochemical, power, pulp and paper, and now transportation. So just a quick highlight, we've trained over, in last year, 2019, 271,000 students that were trained in one of our physical classrooms or virtual classrooms. And we delivered over 1 million training units to those students. And those training units are compliance training as well as safety program training that gets people to work and make sure that they're safely and can show up to work ready for the job. So one of the interesting things that those 1 million training units are delivered, 50% are delivered online, but the other 50% are delivered at one of our 5 locations. So of course, March 13th happened for us, and just like everybody else, we had to figure out how to safely, social distancing, using all the CDC recommendations, how to continue to keep all of our offices open, which we did, never closed one of our offices, but do it safely within those constraints. So we have 142 employees. So the first thing we did was we sent all 142 employees home, and we commandeered every office space, every classroom that we could to turn it into a training center. And we also extended our hours. So from 5 in the morning to now, sometimes 7, 8 p.m. at night, students are at our locations getting their proper training, their site-specific training, their safety training to make sure that they can show up to work the next day. So, of course, you know, all these locations are cleaned nightly. You know, we have hand washing stations and social distancing, but it was definitely an undertaking to do that. And one of the things that we deploy as well is using AI and robotics in our lobby. So this is Pepper. She's behind me. I don't know if you can see her in the video, but she's one of our first humanoid robots for Alliance. Her name is Pepper, and she can give directions in the lobby, so you don't have a human contact. She can send messages from students to our staff remotely. She can remind our students to wear masks. She has facial recognition built in, and remind them to practice social distancing. And it's a much I think it puts a smile on our students' face as well, as we have, instead of our staff having to be the bad guy, we can let Pepper nicely tell them to put their mask on. So this is a quick little video to show that. So that's Pepper. One of the things we also had to do, we already started down this path, but it got our content development team, led by Sherry Bankston, who's also on committee for CURT, for the safety committee, had to really ramp up to convert all of our 1,300 plus courses to make sure that they can be played on a mobile phone, laptop, or any kind of mobile device, making sure that our students can take their compliance training, their safety training in the field. So that was one thing that our students, our owners, and our contractors came to us and said, we have to be able to take our training wherever our students are, because they can't come into the offices. And of course, we have a learning management platform, learning experience platform called Pivot Explore. So right now you can go to pivot.com, it's P-Y-V-O-T, pivot.com, which is our learning management platform, and you have free courses that are available. These were developed in March and April and released in June. So you have your COVID-19 informational course, pandemic review and business continuity, and a COVID-19 workplace preparation course. We also have a certification. It's called Certified Disinfectant Specialist, which is a really hot course. It's 8 modules, and that course is available at pivot.com or disinfectionspecialist.org, which are our students and the owners and contractors came to us, and that was kind of built on demand. So there's some courses that you may be familiar with. This is one of our most popular courses and certification programs called COSS, which is Certified Occupational Safety Specialist. We have Safe Frontline for your frontline supervisors, and then all of our OSHA training that we do through OSHA Training Institute, or what we call Mid-South. All of those were classroom-based. So March and April, we took time to convert those where they're still instructor-led, but they're all virtual now. So now you can become a COSS graduate or a CSOM graduate. We have 13,000 in that alumni. Those 13,000 had to physically travel to one of our locations to take it, and now you can take it all online and get the same certification and the same credential that is nationally recognized. So that was a big request that we had from our members, and we delivered on that, and those are now virtual, and you can sign up now for those. So just a few things that I was asked to touch on was kind of what is the technology that we had to deliver to our members and our students to handle social distancing and just the new guidelines and restrictions that we have. So we print a lot of badges. So all of our programs, when you come in, you get a safety badge, and that badge is your gate entry badge to a lot of our contractors. So one of the things that we came up and developed really quickly was our facial recognition technology. So this is what we call Pivot Verify. So whether you needed to quickly identify a student or an employee or worker in the field, this technology allows you from any camera, any mobile device, using facial recognition to properly identify the student. So it would pop up on your phone or your laptop, and it would take a scan of your face, and then it would ask you to hold a government-issued ID. It would read that facial recognition on the ID, compare it to the picture that it took, and then actually pull any information off your ID that is needed for that course. And we do that within seconds of you opening up the app. And this is something that not only does it identify the student, but the person that logs into the actual class and has taken the test or taken the course, it'll follow that person through the course and make sure that the person that started the course is the person that finished the course, and the person that started the test didn't have any help or a third party that came into the camera view. So this is a big release for us, and something that our contractors really love and our owners mandated in some instances. Same thing is we have now a gate check application. It's called Pivot Gate Check. So similar, a lot of our owners and our contractors, when they're going to a gate entry, putting thousands of people through one entry point and one exit point is not safe or recommended. And so we need to come up with a solution so that you can deploy multiple gates now. So instead of having a lot of equipment to turnstile to put through hundreds of people through a gate, now we have a mobile gate check application. So you can deploy as many of these gate checkers, we call them, as possible. So you can have 6 or 7 people checking in, smaller groups of people, and not having to touch the badge or the physical badge, which is very needed right now. So instead of people handing things back and forth, now you can do it just from a mobile phone, which was very much needed. When you come into one of our facilities or you log in online and take a course, immediately when you finish the course, you're presented with a digital badge on the screen. It's an alternate to the paper transcript. It's delivered right to your smartphone, and it's used as a credential at the job site. So a lot of our owners now accept the digital pass, the digital badge. It's on your phone as soon as you finish the course. As you add and take training, those credentials are added to your digital badge. And just like if you're walking through the airport, no one needs to touch your phone, or you don't need to hand anything to the person at the gate. Same thing with digital badge. You can add it to your wallet and now your credentials are always with the student and can always be scanned without having to get close or hand things back and forth. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mark, and he's going to wrap our session up. But I want to thank you on behalf of Alliance Safety Council, and just thank CURT for being a great partner and allowing us to be part of this session. So Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Travis. You know, I really appreciate being having the opportunity to participate in this event today. I'm Mark Benequisto. I'm the Executive Director of the Millwright Pile Driver Labor Management Group. So I work directly with the UBC, United Brotherhood of Carpenters, and I work with contractors and owners across the various industries to promote the trade and to work on training. So some of the topics I'll talk about today is the COVID-19 preparedness and the ICRA training that the UBC provides. I'll hit on what we're doing in our training centers during this challenging time. I'll talk about our certifications that our instructors go through and our workforce goes through, and then I'll hit on workforce development programs with their Career Connections program and our Millwrights Veteran program. So part of the ICRA, the ICRA training is infectious control risk assessment. This came out of the hospital, the medical environment, and we've had this in the UBC for about five to 6 years now. And we've actually just pivoted probably about a year ago to the food and beverage industry. And it couldn't have been more timely as we rolled into COVID. So it was really, once March 13th hit, we pretty much had our COVID preparedness training that we were able to roll out on our LMS system within a week after COVID hit. So we updated it probably about 4 or 5 times as different guidelines came out from the CDC, from WHO, and just really some of our different owners and customer protocols that they were seeing on site. So we instituted that on the fly, and we were able to update as we went. And then participants or students who had already taken the class would just get the updated slides, and then they could go back through. And once they went through those, then they would get credit for it. So there's a link here, and that'll be in the presentation when you get it, that'll take you to it and you can take a look at it. Some of the mitigation plans that we're doing at our different training centers, which many places are doing this. This isn't anything overwhelming or brand new, but it's how we're getting through it, because we are a DOL apprenticeship. We are required to have the face-to-face hands-on training. So at all of our training centers, we're doing temperature checks and hand sanitizers provided as the students come into the buildings, social distancing in classrooms and work areas. One thing that we've found effective is pairing people up and keeping those individuals. A lot of our classes are 1 week or 2 weeks at a time. So we keep those 2 individuals paired up for the whole week. That way, if there is any exposure, it's minimized to the individuals and not spreading throughout the whole class. Use of face coverings indoors, and when not able to social distance. Our tools in the shop areas are sanitized during every break. We're doing staggered breaks and meals. Right now, our students are taking breaks either outside. We're fortunate this is during the spring and summertime that we can do that, and then in their vehicles. We have a mix of in-person and online courses available for most of our councils. So there's some courses that we are able to offer online, and then there's others that we have to do in person. The COVID-19 preparedness class, every apprentice and journeyman, as they're going through the training center, are required to take this prior to arrival if they haven't already taken it, and then no penalty for rescheduling class due to comfort level or being ill. So if an apprentice doesn't feel comfortable coming to class, either he has a immune compromised individual at home, or he's just scared, there's no penalty in that. They stay at the level that they're at. We work with them to try and come up with some alternatives, and either we'll bring in a reduced class size so that, that until that individual feels comfortable. We've got a single point of entry and exit into all of our buildings, and then our class sizes have also been reduced to accommodate the state and local guidelines. And here's a quick video of some of the International Training Center and specifically around the millwright training.
In this building, which is part of the UBC training complex here in Las Vegas, UBC made a commitment in 2002 to the power industry to train our millwrights to work out on the power deck floors. APM, Siemens worked directly with the Carpenters International Training Fund to develop the curriculum. And that curriculum consists of more than 80 hours of prerequisite training before the millwrights can even come to Las Vegas at our training center to get their training. Here they get hands-on training on a gas turbine, and then they get hands-on training on a steam turbine. And what this is a collaboration between the UBC, the ITF, and the power industry out there, the owners and the contractors, to provide trained, qualified, productive, safe millwrights working on all their projects throughout the United States and Canada.
Here's some of the industries that we serve, obviously power generation, renewables, food and bev, petrochem, oil and gas. But then we get into some of the, some of the newer technologies that are coming out around distribution. We've seen a big uptick in pharmaceutical, robotics, and a lot of municipality work, which we've traditionally done. Career Connections. So Career Connections is very similar to the NCCER program that we're actually putting curriculum into high schools. So we're in over 5,000 high schools currently. We produce all of the training material, and basically we have individuals set up in every regional council across the country where they're dedicated to that high school or that school district, and they'll go in, they'll explain the curriculum, show the curriculum to the staff, make sure that they understand it. And then it's basically a pre-apprentice program. It's a 4-year program where they'll go through each section throughout the 4 years. The first 2 years are kind of general industry, where it gives them an idea of what construction's like. And then their last 2 years, their junior and senior year, they get to pick a specific trade. So it may be a carpenter, a general carpenter, it could be a scaffolder, it could be drywall, metal stud framing, and then we get into the millwright and pile driving sections. So this is a good opportunity. We've grown this tremendously over the last year, and we've seen a huge uptick, obviously, with COVID, where people are now looking at this more favorably. So. And then as far as our locations, we have over 250 local training centers across the US and Canada. I put links into the presentation so that everyone on the webinar can go to them and see where they're at. And then there's also links to the UBC regional councils, which gives contact information for those sites. And then our millwright veteran program, this is our, we've started this 2 years ago. We started off at Fort Hood, where, at Fort Hood, they have over 900 soldiers that transition out of the Army every month. And then we progressed that over to the East Coast to Fort Drum, and we're at 200, there's 250 transitioning veterans each month. We've graduated over 100 graduates so far. I think we've had one that has dropped out, who went back to basically the career he was in before he got into the military. But the military offers, just between these two bases, it's 14,000 candidates a year. So this is really a great opportunity for, not just the union and building, just for the union, it's for all building trades, across the country. This is a great opportunity. We're currently in negotiations right now with Camp Pendleton out in California. Basically Camp Pendleton's got about 6,000 per year. And then if you roll in the San Diego base, we're looking at 20,000 participants that are transitioning out of the military looking for a career. So this has really been one of our star programs that's taken off and very good for us. Superintendent and Foreman Career Training Program. This is an 18-month course. It's 4 3-day workshops where we actually bring in a mentor from a company. So if someone wants to go through this, one of the companies, one of our contractors wants to send one of their supervisors or one of their foremen out for this career training, they actually pick a mentor that goes and shadows with the individual. They go through the 3-day workshops, which is got Penn State and I believe it's Penn State and Stanford are the 2 colleges that we use that teach the course. And then they give assignments back to the mentor and to the student to work on over the next 6-month period before they come back again. So this has been a great program. We're sitting at about 500 for the superintendents that have gone through it, and the foreman class kicked off last year, and I think we were at about 50 before COVID hit. So it's down right now, but it'll be coming back up probably in January. Our instructor certification. So, as Jennifer said earlier, you can't just put, an experienced person from the field into an instructor role and expect to have success. So we go through a series of different trainings for our instructors. They go through a 3-day workshop where they're graded based on their performance, how they can interact with the student, what their teaching abilities are, and whatnot. And then there's 9 different Penn State courses on workforce education that they go through as well. Then the Carpenter International Certification Committee. So these are all of our courses that are third-party certifications where we use proctors to provide the test and go through, particularly our rigging program, which is accepted all across the United States and Canada. And that's it. I hope I got us back on time.
Good job, Mark. And Travis and Jennifer, thank y'all all for a very informative session. So Rob, did we have any questions submitted in the chat room for either Ed or Kevin or Jennifer, Travis, or Mark?
I do not see any questions in the chat box right now, Eddie.
Well, this is your opportunity for all of our participants. Then, if you have any questions for any of the previous panelists, please speak up.
Eddie, this is Boyd. Can I say something?
Please do, Boyd. Glad to have you with us.
Well, first I wanted to thank the presenters. I got involved with this a little bit on the front end, but I think the way the 3 presenters pulled this thing together is really nice. It's done well from the NCCR side, of course, Mark's side, and Travis as well. So you saw kind of a blend of what we're doing from the organized labor side, the labor neutral side, and also from kind of the vendor supplier side as well. So good work on everybody's part to blend all those different pieces together. So I appreciate you all doing that well in these times. The other thing I wanted to say is Jennifer hit on something in her slide that I think is really important. I just want to kind of reiterate it, if you will. She talked about supporting these organizations, ACTE, Advanced CTE, Skills USA. A lot of those organizations have had really tough years. Skills USA, for example, who are dear friends of all of us on this call, just about that know them. The great student-led organization focused on career and technical education, and obviously with heavy emphasis on construction. This has been a tough year for those kind of organizations in that they weren't able to have their annual conferences, which of course are money makers for them. So I think it's just really important that we think about these nonprofit organizations that aren't as fortunate as NCCR to have material that generate revenue for us. So we're in a different spot than a lot of them, even though we're all 501c3s. But those organizations really need our support
to ensure their survival and to keep them strong going into the future years. This has been a really devastating year for some of them. Now, I don't know the specifics of any of those 3 organizations, but it's really important to me personally and professionally that these organizations are up and running many years into the future. So I would say let's make sure we are very supportive of those folks who drive career and technical education in our country, and make sure we do all we can to help them through these times they're in. Okay, thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Boyd, for bringing that up, and you're right on point. You're not only our organizations that support career technical education, but also those that may be indirectly supportive, those such as our local user councils. They too are struggling with their revenue streams being affected by the pandemic. I'm also involved with the Central Gulf Industrial Alliance and also SCORE, the Southeastern Owner and Associates Roundtable. And those are very useful organizations to promote what we're trying to do today and all of our efforts collectively for workforce development. So I encourage you folks who are members of these organizations, please continue your involvement. And if you're not, please consider joining a local user council and get involved with Skills USA as well. So thank you very much, Boyd.
Thank you, bud. Good point.
Eddie, we've got another question. So
okay, very good.
This one's for Kevin and Ed. Kevin and Ed, have you continued recruiting and training new craft workers at the same time, at this time with the same pace?
So great question. And in fact, Ed and Eddie and folks on our workforce development committee will recall this exact conversation probably in May. So the answer to that is yes, we're still training, maybe not necessarily to the pace, because the pace was interrupted by having to essentially redesign lab space and classrooms. But we are continuing to train. In fact, I would argue that it would be very hypocritical of me to say, hey, this workforce supply is temporary. Don't do anything. And because it's not. So no, on our end, and I've been chatting quite a bit in our area, meaning the regions. So the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, both on the merit shop and with the trades. And we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to train and onboard people, but the issues are the same. And that is, so, and I think NCCR would completely agree and endorse the fact that we want to continue training, but it has to be a safe and healthy space to do it. And then if you're an accredited school, like the one that we own, then you add in extra guidelines coming from the Department of Education. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I just didn't want to answer it and say, well, it depends. No, we're all doing it. It's just you have to do it in the right way.
And one thing I would just add to that, this is Daniel Groves, is that on the next session that's coming up after lunch, we'll add a little more flavor and form to that, to what Kevin just said about there being perhaps extra supply now, but in the not too distant future, that supply will be employed. So we'll give you more on that here coming up. So a little bit of a teaser.
Yep, we tried to tee that up for you, Daniel, early when we talked about referring back to CLMA, and then also, I know you've seen it. I don't know if we talked specifically about it, but that quantum shift in the beverage curve.
Yeah. Make sure you join us after the break.
I like the term beverage curve too.
I make one.
That's later, Eddie.
Okay, are there any other questions?
I think Ed had a comment.
Yeah, just one quick comment.
Sure.
I think maybe just an open question to the team here is, there's been some delay in some projects. I mean, not everything has moved forward. Some things have been delayed. And again, I hate to bring it up, but there is an election in November. So I think everybody's got to be real thinking about, how dramatic a change in workforce is going to look like coming out of December and into next year. That concerns me a bit. We've had obviously arguably some problems, and I know there's a lot of good folks doing their best. Unfortunately, the pandemic's not going to help. I think overall, going to put a little more pressure on the entire workforce, and from an owner, I'm just even more nervous because I can't predict and I just don't know what's going to be happening. It's even made it a little more cloudier for me. So others may have comments on that. I don't want to be a negative Nancy about this, but it's a concern.
Good point. Well, if there are no other questions, well, I guess we'll go ahead and adjourn for our lunch break. You're welcome to stick around and network for those who want to do that. But we'll resume the session at 11:45 Central, 12:45 Eastern. So good job for all of our speakers. I thank y'all again. And so look forward to this afternoon's sessions. I think you'll find it very interesting and uplifting in a lot of ways too. So I'll talk to
Thank y'all.
you. Guys, I guess we'll go ahead and get started back to afternoon session. I see we have some new participants. Thank y'all for all joining us. This is going to be, this next session is really, I think, going to be very special. The CURT Workforce Development Committee has endeavored to address the lack of diversity in construction workforce for some time. I think to today's session, where we have some personal experience, what some programs and what we could do, all embrace, I think really helpful for our, not only for our individual organizations, but our industry as a whole. So I'd like to start out with introducing Karen Sobel with Worley. Again, I'll direct you to the bios on the CURT event app, but Karen will be followed by Dave Moody with CJ Moody Construction, and then Stanford Williams with Messer Construction. So gentlemen and Karen, thank y'all again for joining us, and I look forward to hearing you speak. So Karen, you go first.
All right, thanks. Let me see if I can get the screen going properly here. I think we should be good. If someone could confirm, please.
You got it. Do
Excellent.
good.
Thank you. All right.
You didn't take your lessons from Ed, that's obviously.
Yeah, I practiced this morning, I'll be honest. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this session today, combining two things that I really love, one being construction and working in the field, and the other one, diversity and inclusion. I thought I'd start off by telling you a little bit about myself and my own journey before speaking specifically about Worley. I have a fundamental belief, and that belief is that most people are well-intentioned. And this is an important point because I actually don't believe the things that I've experienced over the years were meant to impact me in a negative way. Some of them did, some of them did not. But I don't think they were intended to be negative. The second important point is that I believe we all have unconscious biases. I believe that I even held unconscious biases about myself. And this is critical because we need to understand what unconscious bias is so that we can actually learn to be more inclusive. I went to school at the University of Utah, where I got a degree in metallurgical engineering. I was in a class of only 12, and it was unusual in that the class was majority women, 7 out of the 12. You can probably tell by one of the pictures on this slide that I started my career in the late 80s, in the days of big hair. And I'm not even sure all of it fit into this picture. But anyway, the picture was taken as I was going for my first real job interview to finally be an engineer. And I was really excited about that. The interview was with a company in Denver, Colorado, and I felt really grown up, ready to make it on my own. During the interview, I was asked to take a quiz. I took it and I must have done okay because I got the job. I found out later though that I was the only one ever asked to take a quiz. I didn't give it a second thought because when I heard this, it was said to me in a joking manner. So I just laughed and I was happy to be part of this team. But later in my career, as I became more aware of often being the only woman, I wondered why I was given a quiz when nobody else was. Anyway, the job was great. I got to travel with my work to Canada, Bolivia, Ghana, Australia. It was really an adventure. And spending so much time on construction sites early in my career turned out to be one of the best advantages I had. I learned more in a week than I would spending months in the offices. And it never really bothered me to be the only woman on site or in a camp. And in a way, it was an advantage because I always got the best camp room, which usually meant I had my own bathroom. Other times, though, it was more challenging. I remember one situation where people thought I was the boss's girlfriend, that I really wasn't there to work. After a few weeks, though, they realized I actually knew what I was talking about, and I was accepted. It did take persistence, though. I was working overseas in the Philippines when my second son was born, and I wasn't quite sure how it was going to work being on an expat assignment and maternity leave at the same time. My boss was very supportive. He was able to get the company to put a mat leave while on assignment policy in place. And as far as I'm aware, it was the first time that this ever happened. That boss later became my mentor and sponsor, and he did so much to help me in my career. I'll give you just one example. I was about to take an assignment on a remote project site in a country that did not necessarily see women and men the same. Our client told my boss that he didn't think I could do the job and was not supportive of mobilizing me to site. So my boss said to him, well, let's try it for 3 months, and I'm sure Karen will be successful. And if not, we'll send her home and you won't have to pay for any of her time. So it was agreed. I went, and the job was a success. In fact, that same client individual asked me to stay as the rest of our team demobilized to help him establish their own engineering team on the site. He also apologized and said his concern was for me, my safety, and ability to succeed in this situation. So I know he didn't intend to hurt me, and I was lucky I had such a strong advocate that stood up for me. When I finally decided to settle in Canada with my 2 boys, I was promoted to an executive position for the first time in my career. And it was also the first time that I realized I was different, or at least had my own approach, maybe. It happened when I held my first team meeting. I walked into a full conference room, and all the chairs around the table were taken except the one at the head of the table. And it was the only leather chair in the room. My predecessor was a more traditional leader and insisted on sitting in that chair for every meeting. I asked someone to get another chair and sat in the middle with everyone else. And when I finished that meeting, I actually went back to my office, and it was an office I inherited from that same individual, and I shifted all the furniture around. I was determined to do it my way. Even that story is about 15 years old now. And I've been very fortunate with the opportunities I've had in my career. As I consider what helped me along the way, these are the things that come to mind. Mentors and sponsors. Find someone who will work with you to advance your career. Take career risks. Don't wait until you're 100% ready before making a move. Jump at every opportunity to try something new. Even if it's a lateral move, you will learn something. And most importantly, be your own advocate. Make sure people know what it is that you want. I joined Worley when it was still Worley Parsons in 2013. With over 54,000 staff, including 12,000 craft professionals, we help our customers meet the world's changing energy, chemicals, and resources needs. We are a worldwide team of consultants, engineers, construction workers, and data scientists, all with one thing in common. We love to be challenged. We come to work every day to solve the complexity of the energy, chemicals, and resources sector so that we can deliver a more sustainable world. Over the years, we've grown our capability and footprint through the acquisition of an incredible collection of companies. Our heritage and the relationships we built are very important to us. In April 2019, Worley Parsons and Jacobs Engineering Jacobs Energy, not engineering, Energy, Chemical, and Resources Division came together, and that's when we formed Worley. We recently celebrated our 1-year anniversary as Worley and continue to expand our capability. We've added 2 more members to our family. We acquired 3Sun in November last year. 3Sun is a leading maintenance and inspection service provider to the offshore wind industry in the North Sea. In July, we acquired 100% interest in TW Power Services in Australia. Through TWPS, we provide operations, maintenance, support services to the critical infrastructure across Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. Our Jacobs ECR acquisition brought strong people network groups which support underrepresented and diverse workforces. Today, we have 8 unique people network groups, and they all strive to create a more inclusive culture, and they're people-led networks that span both geographies and business lines. And they have the potential to genuinely create a more inclusive culture. These 8 networks are the All Abilities Network, focused on people with all kinds of abilities. Our Career Network empowers employees to maximize their potential. The Conecta is our Latino and Hispanic people network. Kumba is our Black people network. And our global LGBTIQ+ network includes supportive allies of our LGBTIQ+ community. One World is a network to inspire multicultural diversity and inclusion. We also have the Worley Veterans Network, and our Women of Worley was the first network group that was formed more than 10 years ago. Coincidentally, the same year I joined Worley in 2013, we began measuring our gender diversity stats globally. Since that time, we've seen steady improvement in the percentage of women in leadership roles, with a jump from 22% in 2018 to 26% in 2019. Also, in 2019, 34% of the graduates we recruited were female. Some of the things that we've done to change our gender percentages include setting both global and business line goals, developing a talent sponsorship program, establishing global D&I council, and ensuring we have an overrepresentation of women to attend our internal leadership programs. Women in construction represents one of the largest gender gaps of any field. Women make up 9.9% of the construction industry in the United States. And of these women, only 1% are craft professionals or in construction leadership roles. Currently at Worley, 3.1% of our craft professionals are women. So we're ahead of the game, but nowhere where we need to be yet. So what are we doing about that? The Worley Work Ready mission ensures our company makes a positive impact in the communities where we build our projects. But first and foremost, Worley Work Ready is all about training and employing individuals who may be underrepresented in our industry, like women. Worley developed this program to provide training opportunities for minorities and women, which are near our job sites. Working in collaboration with state workforce investment boards, local one-stop centers, and other nonprofit support agency, prospective employees are identified and pre-screened for participation in the program. Some examples: a candidate might be an unemployed or underemployed worker seeking better opportunities, or perhaps a US military veteran looking for a career that will provide opportunities in a high-wage, high-skill industry. Worley Work Ready benefits our clients by providing a safe, skilled workforce from the community local to their projects. For trainees, Worley Work Ready provides an opportunity to acquire skills needed to enter the industrial construction industry. And it also sets the stage for continued development through training. This program allows participants to train for 45 hours at no cost other than their own time. It prepares them to enter the world of industrial construction. Whirly Work Ready covers safety awareness, basic construction math, and construction drawings. They also learn how to safely use hand tools and power tools. Once an individual completes the training and a battery of hands-on performance-based competency tests, they are hired by Whirly, with the expectation that they will continue to train in the Helper Progression Program. This program is great because it really allows our people to learn while they earn. I'm really proud to be part of the Whirly family. Thanks for your time today, and stay safe. I guess I'll hand it back to Dave.
Thank you, Karen. Dave?
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can everybody hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Loud and
Yes.
clear, Dave.
All right, good, sorry. Today, unfortunately, they were supposed to have replaced my tires yesterday and they didn't deliver them, so I thought I was gonna be done. So I'm outside at a tire place, so getting my chores done. Anyway, I thought that was a great presentation. My name is David Moody. I'm the president and founder of CD Moody Construction Company. Been in business 32 years. I started my career as a staff architect with Vector Power Corporation. And I'm 64 years old, so I'm a baby boomer. I never knew anyone who looked like me that was doing being a general contractor. I went to 2 historically Black colleges. I went to Morehouse College. I came down there and played football. And after I graduated, I went to Howard University to get my degree in it. I got a 5-year professional degree in architecture. And I remember being a baby boomer, I've always kind of came along feeling like I always had to try and be at the next level, push myself, just realizing, feeling like I was always responsible for everybody who came behind me that looked like me. So I've always tried to make sure I did extra well, extra hard. And I probably put more pressure on myself than I had to, but that's how I felt. And I still do today. If you had a chance, you need to read Dr. King's letter to a Birmingham jail, letter from a Birmingham jail. But there's a line where he says, being a Black man, often you have to tiptoe in everything that you do. And there's oftentimes I feel like I tiptoe around because I'm wondering, am I being judged as a contractor or am I being judged as a Black contractor? But, you know, I've been, things have gone, you know, I've had moments where I've gone in meetings and people look like, well, where's Mr. Moody? And I go, I'm Mr. Moody. And they look and they're shocked. But what drives me more now is trying to get more people of color and more females in construction. One of the things I see is a big problem. This is just my opinion. But I remember when I was in high school, my senior year, the fall of 1973, I wanted to take a carpentry class, a home building class, but they wouldn't let me take it because they said I was home prep. I mean, I was in college prep. I wasn't in voc ed. So I was taking architectural drafting courses, but I couldn't take home building. I wanted to learn how to become a carpenter. And that really always bothered me because I never became a carpenter. And more importantly, I feel that we make kids today, from my day on, we make them feel less than if they want to work with their hands. We make a kid feel like if you don't want to go to college, you're less than. And we know in our industry that we have people who finished high school, went to trade school and worked their way up and they make 6 figures or they have their own company. But I think one of the biggest things we must do as an industry is we got to get our public school, our public education system to start doing vocational ed again, but also stop making kids choose so early
that they either college prep or voc ed. There are so many people who want to work with their hands, who want to work outside, but they don't even have voc ed in many schools anymore. So now they're just out there floundering. I think one of the most important things also, I'm the first African-American to lead the state of Georgia Associated General Contractors. And when I joined that organization in 1989, my business was only 1 year old, and it was only 2 Black members, myself and H.J. Russell. And I remember it very, very well, because I remember sitting in that room with all the greats, the Hardens, the Gillerstads from Beers, and just all the big guys, and thinking, gosh, would I ever measure up? Would I ever be accepted? And here I am 31 years later, the president, which says a lot. I stayed in there. I've always felt welcome. But I also felt that I had to measure up, because as we know, when you use the word minority contractor, minority means less than. So often there are a lot of stereotypes that we have to work through, but we're getting better. Hopefully things will continue to get better. But what I want to focus on is, how do we help young people of all races realize construction is a great thing to be in. And I think one of the problems is we have to deal with this vocational ed thing. I think that is a real problem. And again, we make people feel bad. Young people feel bad who want to work with their hands. When I mean feel bad, we always talk about go to college, go to college, go to college. And we don't talk about going to a technical school. Or if we do, we're like, yeah, we'll go to the technical school. And we make those kids feel less than. And I just think we got to improve there. And I'm going to stop there so someone else can speak and answer any questions. And I hope what I've said has been helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. You're spot on many of the things that we as a committee have been promoting for some time now. And I realize I failed to send you a document called Restore the Dignity of Work that contains several recommendations you just hit on. So thank you so much. And we will take questions. No, we had said we're going to take questions after the session, but since Dave has got an appointment going on, if any questions for him or Karen at this time.
I'm going to stay to the whole time. I just wanted to let you know why. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to let you know why I was looking like, where is he? Is he doing a commercial?
You'd make a good one, that's for sure. All right. So we'll Stanford Williams, would you like to go next?
Sure. And great presentation by Karen and Mr. Moody. And I am envious of Karen's PowerPoint presentation. Obviously, I'm not that versed, and I'm actually on vacation. When I scheduled this meeting, I didn't realize I'd be on vacation. I'm in the Hamptons right now, enjoying beautiful weather in the Hamptons. So
awesome.
Excuse my relaxed atmosphere. I forgot that I maybe should have had a collared shirt on or something like that. So I apologize for that. But I'm excited to be here and excited to contribute what hopefully will be insightful for everybody. Again, my name is Stanford Williams. I work for a company called Messer Construction. A little bit about me. I'm born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and went to undergraduate school in Boston, a school called Curry College, a small liberal arts school in Boston, majored in political science, and then went to Howard University like Mr. Moody and got my MBA in marketing and finance, and then went out and tried to conquer the world. I was in printing for a while. I worked for R.R. Donnelley & Sons in New York City for a while, and then worked for another small regional printing company in Washington, D.C., owned by the Kiplinger family called Editors Press. And then I moved to Cincinnati, where my wife was from, to run a printing company for about 10 years. And then there was an opportunity for the county was building 2 stadiums, one for football and one for baseball, and they needed a director of small minority women business development, and I got that job and became entrenched in learning a little bit about construction, and did that for while they built those 2 stadiums, and then went and ran my own business for another 7, 8 years. And then the offer for a director position at Messer, they were somewhat floundering in their economic inclusion or supplier diversity goals, and they said they wanted to really focus on it and bring someone in. So I was fortunate enough to join Messer in 2005. I still had my own business, so I was running my business and working for Messer. I don't think they knew that, but I was doing that for 2.5 years and sold my business right before the Great Recession, and really took Messer to a point where we really wanted to focus on changing the game around what I termed economic inclusion at the time. I created a department for Messer, and we've been, trying to do our thing ever since. So just a little bit about Messer real quick. We're an 88-year-old construction company headquartered in Cincinnati. We're about $1.4 billion in sales, 1,300 employees. We are an ESOP company, so we self-perform work. 50% of our company is comprised of laborers, carpenters, and crane operators. We're a CMGC. We specialize in complex commercial construction projects in the industries of aviation, federal, military, healthcare, higher education, industrial, and science and technology. Those are our market segments. And our purpose really is to approach everything that we do with the core value around economic inclusion. It's an integral part of the culture and who we are. We have an absolute unwavering passion and commitment to 3 areas that encompass our economic inclusion strategy, which is those 3 areas are supplier diversity, workforce diversity, and community engagement. And I'll speak to those in a minute. Like I said, we're headquartered in Cincinnati, but we do have offices in addition to Cincinnati in Ohio. We have them in Columbus, and we have them in Dayton. We also have offices in Kentucky, which is Louisville and Lexington. We have an office in Indianapolis and Indiana. We have an office in Knoxville and Nashville in Tennessee. And then we have offices in Charlotte and Raleigh in North Carolina. And we are continuing to grow and looking for our next opportunities to expand our company. So from an economic inclusion standpoint, I mentioned that we have 3 really core buckets around who we are. And so the first one is supplier diversity, and that's really understanding and appreciating diverse subcontractors, minority women-owned subcontractors, embracing them where they are and trying to ingrain them into Messer. And we've been pretty successful with that. We've received national awards in that regard. Currently, we're about 19.5% of our spend is with minority women-owned certified contractors, which is about $280 million of our spend is with those firms across all of our regions. And so it's obvious that it's ingrained in our culture. And that's very important because it starts at the top in terms of leadership. And we couldn't get this done without, our president and CEO, Tim Starkerwood, and just the execution of his vision to make this happen. We do create business goals for all of our regions. So each region has a goal, and most of the regional leaders are highly competitive. So no one wants to be in last place. So that's good. We track and certify, like I said, and report all of our MWBEs. And we have started to focus on veteran-owned businesses, and we're doing that and becoming successful as there as well. We do have second-tier strategies, ensuring that all firms can participate up and down the supply chain. And we focus on capacity building of MBEs, WBEs, and VBEs so that they can grow with us and so that they can become and learn to become strategic with us. And that's becoming a more aggressive approach for us as an enterprise. The next bucket we have is really around workforce diversity. And from that standpoint, our goal is to recruit and train and retain the diverse talent. We want our regions to reflect the diversity of the communities in which they live. We have a goal every year to hire 20% of our hires be diverse. And so we embrace that, and we've been able to accomplish that goal each of the last 3 years. We have various things that we do in terms of trying to reach those goals. We start at the very beginning. We talk to high school students, elementary students, middle school students about construction. We go to communities where there are predominantly diverse and bring people who look like them into the high schools and middle schools to talk about careers in construction. Just like Mr. Moody said, you know, the worst thing in my mind is having a student who is sitting in a classroom at a college, spending money at a college when they don't belong there. And where they have desires and aspirations to be and to do something else. But a lot of the schools are, you know, hell-bent on making sure kids go to school, go to college, because that's the only, that's their charge. And we have to fight sometimes to get to talk to schools about our industry, primarily because it's just not, you know, pretty and popular. But there are many, obviously, professions in the industry that individuals can you know, take part in, and we need to make sure that they're exposed to those. We do provide scholarships to minority students. I oversee all those scholarships. We have them in historically black colleges like Tuskegee, Alabama A&M, North Carolina A&T, but we also have them in predominantly white colleges, in Berea College in Kentucky. We have University of Dayton, Louisville, University of Louisville, University of Cincinnati, University of Kentucky, and Xavier University. We have scholarships where we use that as an opportunity to introduce our company and talk about Messer, talk about construction. We do provide co-ops. We are a co-op driven company. We have about 180 co-ops in our company during a course of a year. Those co-ops have meaningful jobs. They're not, you know, shuffling paper or making copies. They're contributing to our projects. And so that's how many people get introduced to construction and get introduced to Messer. The University of Cincinnati was the first co-op school in the country. And so since we're based here, we have a lot of people who have come from the University of Cincinnati. And so we embrace and support the co-op environment. And so many of our hires have had 2 or 3 or 4 co-ops with us. And so it becomes important for us to try to help and position minorities in the same vein, that they get exposure to who we are as a company and that they understand what construction is about. And if we can get them to spend some time with us, we have a higher percentage of individuals joining us, but more importantly, we have a higher percentage of individuals staying with us for the long term. We do have diversity ambassadors where we select minority senior managers and partner them with new students who are new employees who are with us. And they spend a year learning the ins and outs and being able to have a mentor to help them answer any questions they may have. We also encourage them to find someone typically in the operations in their region as well, to, after they survey the land, and find someone that they, you know, could connect with, to also work with them as well. So that's very important for us to do that. I think the final bucket then would be our community engagement bucket, and that's really us supporting the community efforts around supplier diversity and workforce diversity. And so we have national relationships with, for example, on the workforce side, it would be the Urban League. There are urban leagues in all of our cities, and we establish those relationships, contribute to those programs that help drive workforce. On the supplier diversity side, we have national relationships with national certifying organizations such as the National Minority Supplier Development Council or the Women's Business Enterprise National Council, which support the certification of minority and women-owned businesses. So that's really the three buckets. Now, I want to speak real briefly about an initiative that I helped create really, I would say sometime in October of last year. I saw and recognized that our craft, which again, as I mentioned, is 50% of our employees, was not very diverse in the leadership aspect. 33% of our craft are minorities, 8% of our craft are women, but 91% of our craft leadership are white male. 0% are female and 9% are African American. And so I saw a need for us to create a program to grow the diversity leadership of our craft. Created the Craft Force Diversity Leadership Program, which kicked off actually in January, and it's really basically intentional leadership with the goal of moving the needle from 9% diverse candidates in 3 years to 20%, and for women from 0% to 5%. And what that is, it's really hands-on, and it's buy-in from our craft force managers, our craft force superintendents, and our leadership, our executive leadership around the area of creating programs and competencies to help these individuals grow, not only in the classroom, but also out in the field. And so there are monthly mentoring programs or meetings that take place. And then quarterly, the supervisors and myself, we get together and assess the candidate every quarter to make sure that they are meeting the competencies and executing out in the field like they need to. And then we have promotions twice a year. And so our goal is to position these individuals so that they're able to move up in our craft program and move towards leadership. And so, as I mentioned before, we just started this thing in January, very coincidental about what's the issues that have been going on in the world or in our country. And so it's been very popular. People have really been excited about the opportunity and the transparency that is needed to be successful. A lot of times individuals feel that things are done behind closed doors, or that they really don't know the rules of the game. And so we've leveled the playing field. Now, as you noticed, I don't have a construction background, so I'm a disruptor. I come into departments, I come into construction not knowing anything, and I still don't know much, in my opinion, but I do know business, and I do know, how to treat people. And I think it's important that people understand, where they are, and we understand where they want to go, and we're both clear on the gaps that are needed to get you to where you want to go, and I'm a firm believer in execution. So we've been fortunate enough that we've been able to promote a few people already in this program, and we feel that this program is going to make a difference. I'm in the executive group of the company, and so I've got a lot of people looking at this program and understanding whether it's going to make or break in terms of our craft, where we take great pride in our self-performance. And we know that if we want to be able to attract people, we've got to have leaders in positions that look like them. And if we're ever going to be able to attract African Americans and Hispanics and women in this industry, they've got to see people who look like them in positions of leadership, and so they can aspire to those positions of leadership. And so I've been fortunate enough to break some barriers at Messer, being the first director, first officer, and first executive on the management side. And I'm working, doing my best to try to bring people along that route. But we needed to find a way to support those craft people, the people that really get the work done, in my opinion, in this industry. And so I'm excited about where we're going, and I can't wait to maybe in this format or down the road, tell you all the great works and things that we've been able to do to help support our craft. But I'm a firm believer that, I sit in a nice office because somebody's out there in the rain and the snow in the early mornings and late at night, getting the real work done, and that we can bill our customers. So I honor our craft, and that's really a mindset that we have in Messer in general. So I'll stop talking and more than happy to entertain any questions or comments anyone may have. Thank you.
That's a great job, Stan. Thank you. And I'll tell you what, all three of y'all did an outstanding job. I was very impressed with the results that Messer has accomplished by increasing the diversity pool, and applaud you for your efforts to in seeing that there are still opportunities in leadership to address that. So excellent.
Thank you.
So we are a little ahead of schedule. So instead of waiting till later for questions for this panel, we'll go ahead and take them now. So did anybody have any questions? Rob, has anything been submitted?
Nothing has been submitted in the chat box, but I did have a question. So
Okay.
Everybody on that panel talked about engaging more at a high school level and needing to change the curriculum. Has there been any conversations from your organizations on how you could partner with schools on getting more engagement?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah, we do partner with schools. We have the biggest challenge we have with students obviously is their age and ability to work on construction sites. So what we try to do is give them introductions to various other areas of our company. And so, the cool thing is BIM, right? So we've got kids who are in our BIM program, and this is, again, all before COVID. Okay, so let's be clear. So we would have kids, spend time in our BIM or in our estimating or accounting program, departments, just to learn a little bit about construction. They would be able to go on at least to the trailer of job sites and see what was going on. We would take them there, but we do have a challenge really because of their age of bringing them on the actual site. But we have relationships with several schools across our footprint to engage students and, like Mr. Moody said, introduce students who may not be thinking about going to college, or maybe college is not for them. College is not for everybody. And I tell people all the time, if you get a call from home that a pipe is burst, you're not going to sit there and say, well, let me find 3 bids. Let me make sure that they're all competitive. Let me make sure. You need somebody to fix that damn pipe and to shut off that water. And so the need for trades is there, right? We all know in our own personal lives the value of electricians, HVAC, plumbers, all of those folks that do the work that is essential to help us live comfortable lives. We've got to have a pipeline for those individuals. And again, as someone mentioned, you can make a good living. I know many people who are making 6 figures in construction, who got a nice F-150 that's loaded, or a nice Chevy Ram truck that work for us, that are living a good life and have they're single and they're 28 years old and they got a house and they're living a life sometimes that I wonder about. I'm sure you guys know what I'm saying. So
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. No,
so you can make a real good living. You can live your own life. You can be in charge, and that's hard work, absolutely. But you got to be disciplined. You got to be focused, and you got to execute. But that's everywhere you go in life. So that's no different. But there's a real honor, in my opinion, with being someone that can work with their hands and can be disciplined and execute. So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I could add something to that as well, because I think there's an opportunity to change the narrative with students, because I heard both Stanford and Dave talk about, I think Dave put it as being seen as lesser. And certainly I don't see that, and I don't think Worley sees it that way either, because we actually look at sending our engineers to the field as much as possible to learn from the construction folks there. I said it in my presentation, I'd learned more being out in the field with the construction workers who work with their hands and really understand the project than I would ever do working in the office. And I think we need to shift that narrative that it is a two-way learning opportunity. And the other thing I'll say is two of the gentlemen that work for me in my business and run huge parts of the business started out on the tools, and both are now presidents of our companies. And I think there is a lot of opportunity. You can choose which way you want to go. If you'd like to stay working in the field, or perhaps you want to try something in the corporate office as well. So I think it's up to us to change that narrative.
Mr. Booty, did you have something?
Yes, I did. 1 sec. Yes, one of the things I think, like with Associated General Contractors, we have a lot of skill challenges in the high schools throughout the state of Georgia. And our company, I personally do a lot of work with the back to work construction group, folks getting a second chance in life. But I'm speaking more of the middle school, high school students, especially in high school. A lot of the metropolitan public school systems have pretty much done away with vocational ed, such as carpentry, plumbing, and electrical. So we're trying to help get them to see the importance of bringing that back. It's kind of like that was one of those departments that was kind of taken out in budget cuts. But also, again, as Americans, we tend to put a lot of focus on having a college degree versus from a four-year school versus having a skilled trade. So I just want us to try and keep working to change that narrative. And we're doing that in our company, and we're doing that in Associated General Contractors too.
And you guys are also working with CEFCA there in Georgia too.
Yes. Yes, we do a lot of work with CEFCA.
Good.
So another question came in. Has anyone sought partnerships with incarcerated individuals?
Well, on our projects, we do have I do a lot of work with the West Side Works in Atlanta, and a lot of those folks do have criminal records, and our down here in Georgia, we tend to work quite a bit with folks who have had criminal records, and we do work with organizations that are helping people get back to work.
Yes, we created a program as well in Ohio and Cincinnati, which really focuses on we don't go right to the prisons, but the places where they're released, we have a relationship with those organizations, and we try to focus on two things with those individuals. Typically, those individuals have most of them are younger individuals who may have made a mistake and trying to get their life back in the straight and narrow. And there are two things we focus on. Number one, it's really the competencies and the skills around construction, introducing in the construction. But we also learned that the social services component is critical. If people are not focused, if they're worried about their child care, transportation, health and wellness, and housing, those four areas, if they're worried about those, they really can't bring their whole self to work. And so we focused on trying to find a way to deal with those issues while transitioning them into full-time employment. We have a program, we call it the Uptown Workforce Development Initiative, where we've taken individuals, we have a relationship with an organization called Easter Seals, and they have an organization called Building Value, which is a work hardening component of their organization, and they deconstruct homes. And so we introduce an individual to Building Value, and they learn the basics of construction by working with Easter Seals and Building Value and deconstructing homes. And then we leverage our $2.7 billion worth of backlog to encourage employees, subcontractors, to take these individuals on for a 3 to 6 month basis on a particular project, and at no cost to the subcontractor. And through, again, us working on the 4 major barriers from a social services standpoint, and this individual having a meaningful relationship with a subcontractor. And so there has to be some intentional mentoring going on over that 6 to 8 month period between working for Building Value and working for the subcontractor. We've had subcontractors hire 30 people over the last 2 years on a full-time basis, who really were individuals that were looking for a second chance, moving them from that environment to sustainability is what we're trying to do. So we've been able to leverage that program with, number one, an owner that appreciates and embraces that, because the owner is in the actual community as well, the diverse community as well. We have subcontractors who understand how important it is for that owner and for us being able to leverage our future backlog of work for them. And we've been able to change people's lives by having this program. So yeah, it's been very successful. But it requires a lot of work. You have to be very intentional, and it's just not easy.
Thank you. And Stanford, how do you identify minority candidates to be promoted to superintendent in your program?
Yeah, that's a great question. We focus, so in our craft department, there are 8 levels of individuals based upon competencies and skill in performance on the job. So we focus on mastering the competencies that are required for each position, each level, and then executing on the job. And those 2 come into the evaluation of how we select and promote individuals up the chain through the craft department and craft leadership program. So it's really competencies and execution in the field.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good, good. Are there any other questions for any of the panelists? Well, I wish there was an applause feature in Zoom. I haven't figured that out yet, but you guys did a great job, and thank y'all again for taking the time to join us today, and a very, very insightful discussion. So our next session is the Labor Risk Management Program with some updates and testimonials. And also I'll let Daniel Grove, who's Director of Operations for CURT, to say more about himself, his program, and introduce his speaker. So Daniel?
Good afternoon, guys. Great to chat with you all. It's really good to be here. It's been a great session so far, and looking forward to a whole lot more here throughout the remainder of the next 45 minutes or so. One of the things I wanted to do, at least at the beginning, is just to mention, maybe for our team at CURT, is I know that one of our speakers, and that's Alex Balser at Lyondell, and he's got some really good things to say. He was not able to join for the earlier part of this because of conflicts today, and so he should be on at any moment. And so I know we're starting just a few minutes early, but I just keep watch for him so that he'll know to join when he arrives.
I'm here, Daniel.
Oh, excellent. Sorry, I didn't see Alex. Okay. Well, good. Well, I will introduce these guys as we get going and as we come to their parts of the presentation. And of course, on the app are their full bios in the interest of time. I'm Daniel Groves, and as Eddie mentioned, I've got my fingers in a few different things around CURT, around workforce and metrics and benchmarking, as well as managing the CLMA and productivity benchmarking, safety benchmarking, and a number of things. So it's a lot of fun, but workforce is one of the key things that I'm involved in. And so what I wanted to do today was just share with you some of the things that we are seeing looking forward. and then some of the things that we are working to do to address those challenges. And they are challenges. It may feel like some of the pain has been relieved momentarily, but as was already mentioned earlier, it will return. And I think how we prepare for that is really important. And so one of the first things I want to just mention is, I think we first have to agree on what the problem is that we need to address. What's the risk problem that really is the biggest challenge that we see? It's certainly labor uncertainty, but we don't always view that the same, what that may mean. But we all are feeling the impact of it in one way or another. And if we really want our project outcomes to improve, we're going to have to do something to address that. What I want to start with regard to this is just kind of give some perspective of where we're heading in the marketplace, where we were and where we're going. So on this, let me orient you to this chart, which really isn't too challenging once you understand it. And so everything on the top half of this chart relates to spending, and everything in the bottom half of the chart relates to the demand for skilled labor. So it's the workforce that's needed to deliver on the projects that it's represented in the spending above. So this is the entire United States. This is all non-residential. So includes industrial, includes water, sewer, roads, bridges, highways, schools, all those kinds of things. And as you can see in here, that dashed line shows the forecast that we released at the beginning of the year. And so at the end of every year, we prepare a forecast looking out, usually about 10 to 15 years. And in January, we released this, and that dashed line represented the spending that we were expecting to see going forward. Of course, we were at the tail end already, or presumably at or near the tail end of a over 10-year growth cycle in our industry and our economy. And so there was going to be a little bit of downturn that was to be expected. It's inevitable given the nature of economies. But overall, we expected some pretty good strength. And of course, COVID hit. Oil price issues hit. And so things really changed in the marketplace. And so where we expected to continue to see some increase, we actually ended up seeing some decrease here. The important thing to note is that not every project was canceled. Not every project came to an abrupt halt. Some just moved farther to the right. And of course, that varies by company, by projects and locations and all kinds of things. But generally speaking, we are seeing that return in spending will come back. Now, there is a lot of uncertainty. I think a lot of what's happening to us economically is a kind of it's a reset in a major way. And so what happens farther down the road, more than 4 or 5 years out, let's say, is a little bit more looking into a crystal ball. And so that uncertainty is reflected in this chart. But directionally, we feel pretty confident that this is where we're headed. So the point really in that is, while the pain may be felt now, there's an expectation of growth in the not too distant future. And down below then, the lower half of the chart, of course, you see the demand for the skilled labor needed for those projects. That dark area, the dark gray is the baseline. The lighter gray area is what happens when you add infrastructure spending to that, which of course has been proposed, it seems perennially, by Congress, but at some point here is likely to happen and needs to happen as well. So a lot of activity is expected in the not too distant future again. And so that brings us to the imbalance of supply and demand. And that red line there represents that demand, or I'm sorry, that supply of skilled labor. It's interesting that you'll note here that it's below the demand, the expected demand. So the first instinct might be to say, well, looks like there's not much of a problem. And so this is where I think it's so important to ask the question, what is the problem that we're really facing? Is it workforce shortages? Because for some crafts, no. In other crafts, yes. Overall, we believe the real challenge, it has more to do with competency, training, the skill level of the workforce. And I'm going to illustrate that a little bit more here in just a moment. So this is the entire United States. And of course, it's also important to note on here that not every area of the US is the same. And so this represents the entire US, and certain areas are a lot more challenging than others, of course. I want to show one other region, and that's the Southeast. The Southeast, of course, all these numbers, and I'm sorry, not numbers, but these lines are the same in terms of the upper half of this being spending and the lower half being demand. The lines aren't exactly the same. The Southeast has been pretty robust, and of course, a whole lot of that has to do with what's happening in the Gulf Coast area. But you'll notice that the imbalance, that red line relative to demand, is much more acute, and that's concerning because there's so much more activity in terms of the spending that our industry is particularly interested in, the industrial space. There's so much more activity in this area, and this imbalance is expected to be pretty challenging as we move forward. This gets even worse. And by the way, all these slides are available to you. So in the interest of time, I'm not drilling into them too deep, but I at least want you to know that you'll have those available to you as well. And so when I talk about this challenge, this slide right here is representative of what matters probably to folks on this call and this meeting the most. And that's those most highly skilled workers. And by that, we focus that in on about a dozen plus workers. That would be boilermakers and millwrights and instrumentation techs, electricians, iron workers, pipe fitters, and so on. Those crafts that take a good amount of time, even after you've recruited them, to move them to minimal competency and then productive and experienced to a seasoned professional. And so at the bottom there, you'll see the timeline on how long it typically takes. Not everybody's the same. Not every craft is the same. But how long it typically takes in order to get those workers from a new recruit to a seasoned professional. It just doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes investment. But the calendar's working against us at the top in terms of the amount of workforce that is expected to retire in the next 2, 5, 10, and 15 years. So these are major challenges that have to be addressed pretty significantly. And while the sky perhaps doesn't ever really fall in terms of this workforce challenge, we keep moving closer and closer to a cliff. And as you can see, in 2029, the last of the baby boomers turn 65. And this problem might be slow in its ramp, but it's still pretty significant. And by the way, this data is not based on some sort of a forecast. It's based on the data that we receive, which provides actual birth dates. And so it's just a matter of projecting potential retirement years for some of these different crafts. And of course, certain crafts might be earlier than others because they're much more physical. So when you look at these numbers, it's based on actual birthdays of the workforce. And so it's very concerning when you look at the amount of attrition that's expected. So again, our workforce shortage is really the problem. When we talk about this, we tend to focus on these items on the left. In my view, these are more of the symptoms than the actual problems. And it's not that they aren't significant challenges. Obviously, productivity challenges, rework, budget, safety, all those are important and have to be addressed. And there's a lot of great work being done in order to address those. But what we're not doing in our industry is effectively measuring and creating metrics and benchmarking capability as it relates to workforce development. We do a great job in safety. And we'll see about how that's changed and improved, but we haven't done it here. And that requires leadership. And that's where I believe the root cause lies. And if we can get our industry to lead, particularly owners, if we can get them to lead in this, I think we have the opportunity to drive real change and real improvement. And that's what we're going to talk about more here. So there's a case for change to be made. It really boils down to 3 points. One, transformational change is needed. Secondly, there's a model for doing it. And 3, there's a business case for doing it. So first of all, transformational change is needed. I've shown this chart before, so I'm not going to dwell on it too long. You might say, well, we're not in that moderate to severe category any longer. We were right before COVID, right before oil prices collapsed and so on. And so if you believe what we were talking about earlier and what you know anecdotally that the industry will improve, then it's not going to take too long to get back to where we were. And that is in this category, moderate to severe, where 75 to 80% of the contractors identified themselves in terms of staffing difficulty prior to all of this, then we can see that it's difficult to, into perpetuity, sustain budget increases on average of 17%, scheduled 23%. And even more importantly to all of us is the dramatic increase in safety incidents as a result of this. So transformational change is needed. We can't assume we're on the right path right now. We have to improve it. Secondly, and I think not only is transformational change needed, but we have a model for doing it. And so one of the things that CURT has espoused, and by the way, that goes all the way back to the mid-1980s when CURT was still part of the Business Roundtable, and that is that owners should do business with contractors investing in training. And this isn't intended to be pejorative or punitive. This is intended to be a collaborative, positive effort where together we move the industry forward and improve this, and we measure it and improve it, and it's an ongoing process. We can do that, but this is where leadership is required. And when that happens, I think we'll unleash the kind of innovation and produce the kind of change that's possible. That model for change is reflected through safety. So if you look all the way back to where safety was in 1989, and again, this is a chart I've shown before as well, but safety performance among CURT and CII members was pretty abysmal, and we consider ourselves the best. But that's an unsustainable 7.19 for TRIR back in the late 80s. And then owners began requiring this, and this dovetailed with OSHA requirements. We began to see improvement, but it still took 15 years to get below 1. And it just doesn't happen overnight, even though that change obviously began pretty immediately and was a dramatic and steep decline in the number of safety incidents. That's exactly what you want to see. But it's because owners led. It's because owners said, if you want to work on our projects, you have to perform safely. This is a business imperative for us, and rightly so. Now, one of the things that we've started to see a little bit is a little bit of an uptick in more recent years. The current data will be out, or the most recent 2019 data will be out shortly. I didn't have it ready for this, but hopefully that trend has begun to reverse, but we've seen a little bit of an uptick. And that chart I showed earlier shows that staffing difficulties can lead to this. And then the third case I wanted to make, or the third point I wanted to make with regard to this change is that there's a solid business case for doing it. So if you look at what RT231, a research study from CII that CURT was integrally involved with a lot of other owners and contractors and folks in the marketplace. But it advocated 1% of the labor budget of every project being invested in training. And so if you look at what we modeled here for a project, $250 million TIC, about a 30-month project, and if 1% is invested in training on that, the average amount of ROI that was possible was $6.75 for every dollar invested. And obviously on the right-hand side, you see the upper and lower bounds. But there's real value, there's real return on investment for owners to make this requirement of training. And when that happens, there's a couple things that occur. Number one, it gives the contractor the opportunity and the reason and the backing to be able to make this investment. Contractors often operate with fairly thin margins. It becomes challenging if you're the only one doing something like this, and only one of a few doing this, and everybody benefits from it. For all that to be on the back of one contractor, very, very challenging. But obviously, the cost of this can accrue back to the owner. And if that happens, what kind of ROI should the owner be able to expect? And you can see that this is even better than what was modeled in that RT 231 research. So we're excited about the opportunity here to dramatically improve the industry. And this is based on a single project. So even if only one owner does this on a project within their organization, they have the ability to realize a good return. And if you look at this overall, what did that research indicate was possible? Well, it's pretty significant for both capital and maintenance projects. And that research said that there should be at least a $3 ROI that could be achieved, and we believe it's even greater than that. And one other thing I want to add to this is, that RT 231 advocated that 1%. We've not done a very good job as an industry in doing that. Some companies do that, very few in my experience and the ones I talked to. So let's go back and look at that same chart that we were looking at earlier. And again, owners put a requirement in place. RT 231 recommended this 1% investment. So what would have happened had we made that investment over that period of time since that research was done? Well, this is a zoom in look at that window of time that if we had implemented this, we believe there could have been at least a 13% TRIR year-over-year improvement. But we believe had it been implemented, we think it could have been even better than that. And so we've seen this reflected just in owners back to us saying that when they begin categorizing these injuries that happen at the lower end of that scale, so let's say you're doing great and you're at TRIR of 0.25, how do you get from there to 0? And when you categorize them in that grouping, and the owners are reporting back to us that they've seen that a lot of those end up being injuries that could have been prevented through better training. So, as an example that I've used before, what if the worker had been trained better to position the grinder or themselves so that those sparks weren't coming directly at them? That may not be safety training, but if you get trained properly on those use of tools, now you're being safer in the process as well. So this isn't just about workforce development. Oftentimes we might hear about workforce development and, and we're like, yeah, it's that topic again. That's a shame. We need to be vigilant about it because safety is dramatically impacted by what happens here as well. So owners are the essential solution. I used to say the crisis is now, but of course now that COVID is here and so on, we've had a little bit of a lull, but it'll return. And when it does, we need to be ready for doing that. And again, this is where we believe leadership is so critical in making this happen. And that's what the LRM, so this is the solution part of this. That's what the LRM is attempting to accomplish. It's predicated on this notion by CURT and others in the industry, BRT, CII, and others, that contractors should invest in this. Owners should support it in a meaningful way. It's supported by research that shows there is an opportunity for improvement, not just in safety and absenteeism and rework and all those kinds of things, but real savings in terms of dollar value. There's a tool for measuring it. It's the CWDA. And that's a way of measuring that workforce development commitment and training activity so that it can be benchmarked in the industry for improvement. And then there's a database for managing all these metrics and feeding them back to the marketplace in order to improve. And so it's based on owners committing. Doesn't have to just be the owner. It could start with a contractor. I mean, we have contractors who we're working with on the LRM who say, we're going to do this on projects, even if the owner doesn't require us to, because we think it helps us be better, to compete and deliver a better project. But it's ultimately, ideally, it starts with the owner. They engage the contractors. The contractors, EPCs, GCs, et cetera, engage all of their contract partners. And then that data is fed in. That data then is analyzed. It's fed into the labor risk index. I'll show you that in just a moment. And then all of that is used to improve what's happening on projects as it relates to workforce development and training. And this is not a one-time process. This is a continuous process. It's continuous on every project, and it's also continuous during the project, so that over the life cycle of a project, it's constantly being measured against goals, so that you don't get to the end of the project and wish you'd done it better. But you set the goals at the beginning, you measure incrementally along the way, so you can make adjustments along the way and get a better outcome. It's not about looking backward and hoping and wishing, but it's about looking forward and actually making those adjustments. So that data feeds into this labor risk index. And so what this LRI is intended to do is basically provide a single score. Now that single score, in this case, it's a 1.06. This is just a dummy one, but that 1.06 is good. Anything above 1 is good, and the higher the better. But that doesn't tell you everything you need to know. So in that, once you have that score, you're able to benchmark it against the industry, you're able to benchmark it against your peers, and then you're able to also drill down deeper into for now at least, the 5 key elements that support the LRI. Safety performance, labor shortage and how you're responding to that and prepping for that, productivity, quality, so rework, defects, et cetera, and then what's your CWDA assessment and score. And so all of those allow you to understand exactly what's built into that LRI score, and you can drill down as deep as you want. And so to understand the LRI, it's important to think about it in terms of FICO. So this is to labor risk on a project for a contractor, what FICO is to credit and lending, and EMR is to safety performance. It starts at a high level, and then you can drill down as deeply as you need to in order to understand what's going on and plan. I'm not going to go into every piece of this, but I want to in particular mention the CWDA, because this is really one of the key elements. This is a very careful assessment of workforce development and training programs for each contractor, and understanding exactly what it is they're doing, what kind of investment is being made, how is it supported by leadership, how is it recognized in the industry, and then how does it benchmark in the industry against the whole, and then against peers in particular. The whole point is to drive improvement. None of this is designed to be punitive. Every bit of it is designed to drive improvement. And so as a contractor, there are so many ways that you could look at this and find value, both in terms of building your brand, delivering a better workforce, and so on. Helps owners better understand what kind of risk they are going to be assuming and realizing as they're bringing contractors onto the project. So again, all of this is designed, much like safety, to drive improvement, never designed to be punitive. So the last key thing I wanted to mention with regard to this is timing for it. The earlier, the better. Ideally, FEL2 could happen sooner, could happen in FEL3. FEL2 is really a good place to get this started. This is where decisions are being made that are so critical. Will there be enough workforce to stick build a project? Should we modularize it? What's our contracting strategy going to be, et cetera? And then as we're bringing contractors in through the RFP process and so on, how are we making those selections? What is the risk of getting on the labor side of this project, of ensuring we deliver a productive quality work, the contractors are delivering a productive quality workforce in order to meet the needs of the project. So FEL 2 or 3 are the ideal times to engage this process. It can happen later, but it's not as ideal. once those contracts are in place, it becomes very challenging to begin implementation of this. And so the earlier the better. And again, as I mentioned before, then the process happens throughout this project where you're measuring this in order to drive improvement. So my final slide is, I showed you earlier on a single project what kind of value can be realized. But what happens like in safety if everybody is doing this? So we know today that because of what owners require on projects, we know that contractors are training around safety. We know that workers are being trained. So as they move from project to project, contractor to contractor, that safety commitment is happening, and that training is occurring. And we know it's happening because we're measuring it and owners are requiring it. We don't do that on workforce. But if we were, that $6.75 I mentioned earlier takes a pretty significant jump, because now the industry is engaged together. We're raising the tide, which lifts all boats and all workers in this case. And I think we have the opportunity to see a tremendous amount of value in this. So we're excited about the interest we're getting in the marketplace on this. I think we have the opportunity to dramatically change the industry and really improve how we deliver projects, improve our workforce, and get better outcomes. So thank you for the opportunity to chat about that. Let me introduce now Alex Balser at Lyondell. He's the global planning and risk manager for Lyondell. Worked with Alex for a number of years around issues related to the workforce and project planning and labor risk. And Alex, let me turn it over to you, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic today.
All right, I appreciate the introduction, Daniel. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I did ask if there was any way to make my picture a little larger on the introduction slide, but apparently there's some Zoom limitations. So
that was the best we could do, Alex.
With the smaller image, so my apologies. So you've all just heard a pretty thorough overview of the LRM program from Daniel. And to be honest, transparent, Lyondell, we're kind of in our infancy as it's related to the LRM program. We have been working with CLMA, gathering the overall, I'll say macro level craft availability data and dialing that into our overall analysis. But I'm going to take a little bit more of a high level approach over the next few minutes, focus on some of the overall qualitative drivers that we are seeing internally that are helping to push us into exploring a solution such as the LRM to bring some overall value to our portfolio. So I started by just pulling together a pretty generic owner's goal statement for this effort, how we would like to engage with a contract partner to execute a project. It's probably not a perfect statement and can be fine-tuned, but when you think about it, what's the key thing that we want to accomplish? We need to deliver a project successfully. And so much of that hinges on being able to build trust among two or more parties, make commitments and meet those commitments. At face value, it seems pretty basic, but in reality, it's the gold standard and it's pretty difficult to attain. Next. So as Daniel mentioned, part of my role is leading our capital project risk group, and this gives me some insight into some of the common themes that we see typically across our portfolio of projects. And I can assure you, if you were to pick up any specific project risk register, somewhere along the upper right in that red zone of the risk matrix, you will consistently find a handful of the risks that we're talking about here today. Availability, productivity, turnover, and the overall competency and skill set of our craft workforce. These obviously can be catastrophic to our projects. They materialize clearly in cost overruns, schedule extensions, but I almost look at it as larger than an individual project issue. These can also cause major issues, ruin working relationships between an owner and a contractor. And you need these tight working relationships. They can have impacts lasting multiple years in some instances, just due to one instance of an issue related to workforce competency and training that manifested on a project. So the ramifications are much larger than one individual scope, craft, project. They can be far-reaching across the whole portfolio. And when you look at those, the 5 that I listed there, they're all interrelated and codependent. There's no one, you don't have one without the other. And it's pretty easy to snowball, out of control, reach a tipping point, and at some point you just can't recover. So the question is, as an industry, how do we get ahead of these issues, mitigate the root causes? And if you go to the next slide, I shared a little bit of my personal experience on the last slide and what I see, but I wanted to try to represent the rest of my peers, both internal and external. So I reached out to them and just kind of raised the same questions that we're asking, and asked for some of their views and thoughts and feedback on this topic. As you can see there, you probably sense a lot of the same themes emerging. One of the questions I hear consistently, no matter who we're dealing with, is how do we know we're getting the contractor's A team? So this has been the buzzword, the question that I've heard in the past 15 years of my career, since the first time I stepped foot on a plant site in LaPlace, Louisiana. Are we getting our A team? How do we know? I'm not going to read through all of these other points, but take a look, and I'm sure some of those might resonate with you guys. But the key takeaway is that there's a legitimate need, not just within Lyondell, not just among the owners, but across all of industry that still needs to be addressed. Our contracting groups, they all do a wonderful job of establishing criteria, conducting due diligence every time we have a bid for a project, and we're working with either new or previous contractors that we have experience with. This is a time-consuming process, and even with the best vetting processes that we have, visibility into the past performance and some of the details and information that you're going to get is murky at best. To some degree, you're always going to get a sales pitch from the home office on all the wonderful tools and processes that contractor ABC has, and no one else can bring to the table what they can. But at the end of the day, the people that show up in the field, they might not even be aware of or able to execute to those promises. Heck, if you have the same company that you just dealt with and had a wonderful experience, if you hire them again for the next job, there's no guarantee you're going to get the same field leadership or the quality of the crew. So consistency is difficult to maintain. Everyone's trying to do more with less. So it comes back to all the data points that we have available out there. Is there a way to pull them all together and present them, utilize them in a standardized, useful fashion? So if you go to the next slide, just in general, I think the key takeaways are we need to have good, well-qualified, competent people. They need to have the right tools and systems in place to be successful. And all of that comes back to a continuous improvement culture driven on both the owners and the contractor side to set this as an expectation for our continued workforce development. You can't assume you automatically get any of the above, no matter who you're dealing with, what what logo is on the business card or letterhead. Really, everyone is facing a similar level of workforce development, retaining craft, and it just needs to be a priority. And hopefully, we should be able to overcome, I use the word distrust here, but it's overcoming uncertainty through data. Do we have the ability to look at a clear, level playing field of all the information, have a good understanding how well our companies value this workforce development, how successful they are at actually institutionalizing workforce development, retaining craft, and bringing them along with the overall view of the companies as we progress from project to project. And just kind of in closing, it's critical for us to have these relationships. The owner-contractor relationship must be strong. We need to be able to build, retain, and continuously improve our workforces. How do we do this? The most effective way, and ensuring long-term compliance, will be to rely on some industry standard way of measuring and validating all of this data and implementing it in a fair and efficient manner. So those are some of my thoughts, some of the views from the owner perspective as to really why this is needed and why we at Lyondell are going to continue working to drive this.
Great, thank you, Alex. Appreciate you giving us a really good owner's perspective on this challenge and how to address it. So appreciate that. I want to switch gears now to Worley. Scott Marshall, Director of People Operations for the Americas at Worley, and Scott's been a great champion for ensuring a quality workforce, a competent workforce, and provides, I think, a really good contractor's perspective on this as well. So we've heard from an owner on their perspective, and be really interested now in hearing Scott's perspective on this. And then when he's done, we'll open this up for Q&A. So please be thinking of some things that you want to ask these guys about labor risk. So Scott, we were able to make your picture as large as possible as well.
That's great.
So we feel like you were in the room with you.
Perfect. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. But before I start going through the slides, I just want to comment on a couple of things that Daniel presented, and I think Alex touched on when they were talking. And it has to do with kind of the market downturn we see right now due to the pandemic and what happened with oil prices. And one of the dangers that I've seen us be guilty of is that we tend to lose focus on some of the issues we're discussing today during market downturns, or when the spending isn't at the levels that we've seen over the past 8 to 10 years. And I think the problem with that is that skill gaps don't get fixed by market downturns. Productivity issues don't get fixed by market downturns. Retirement dates may get delayed a little bit in the future by downturns in the market, but your knowledge management and transfer issues do not. So I think this is an issue that regardless of the market, regardless of the state of our economy, that we all have to remain focused on, and growing the skills and bringing new and more diverse and inclusive practices into our industry is something we all need to be focused on and doing regardless of market conditions. So I think this meeting and this topic that we're presenting today is timely, and I hope it's impactful and something that we take on as an industry and really focus on and do something about together. But when you look at what we're doing from a contractor perspective at Worley, really our focus is to drive engagement in our programs, starting with our employee, the communities we work in, our company overall, engaging our client, and then through forums like this, taking those successes and driving that engagement through the industry. I'm not gonna read all these quotes, but you can see from our president of our U.S. Field Services business to our frontline supervisors and our craft professionals, these testimonials describing the engagement and the focus we have on workforce development, our programs, and our employees within Worley. Next slide. You know, we really believe that our mission starts with the 4 pillars we have in our workforce development program. And first, we focus on research. So what are the issues? What's our workforce look like? What do our demographics look like? What's our diversity inclusion look like? And then we compare that against the forecasting models, CLMLA. We participate in that and have since its inception. And then comparing and identify talent pools. So what are the underutilized talent pools, right? I think when earlier presentations, you heard from Karen and others about the underrepresentation of women and minorities in our workforce models. So how do we fix that? How do we change that dynamic and really grow that segment of our workforce? And then align training programs to those identified industry needs. And then the next step in the process is how do you model your recruiting practices? And you take a more strategic outlook in your recruiting against that research that you just conducted, and you fix the issues in your talent acquisition process. You automate, you get more efficient, you get more informative, get more collaborative in order to attract and retain the workers that you need. And then how do you integrate that talent into your workforce? How do you ensure that they're onboarded properly and in a timely way, that they show up to work with the information and the training they need to be successful, versus showing up and then the project takes 2 or 3 weeks to get them acclimated to industry. And then how do you train the best? How do you develop those resources? So our view was we took a defined learning path from entry-level worker all the way up to a site manager or project manager. And every level of job from that entry-level worker up to that level has been mapped. There's clear competencies and expectations for each role, and there's training metrics established so that we can track. So somebody coming into the industry today, we can actually show them the complete career path to get to whatever their goal is, whether it's a frontline supervisor, a discipline superintendent, a construction manager, or a project manager. And all the assessments are in place and training curriculum is in place for them to learn. And we modeled the program so that they can learn in a manner that's conducive to them. Everybody learns differently. Some it's classroom, it's self-study, others it's online. We recently, a few months ago, worked with NCCER to pilot some of their online curriculum. I think that's something that we need to continue to invest in and look at in the future. And then how do you take those engaged employees and give them the mentoring they need to be successful? Learning isn't only in the classroom. There's a lot of on-the-job training and performance assessment that goes into credentialing. But more importantly, and as important, is mentoring. You know, how do you ensure that people have the soft skills? They can communicate, they can lead, they can facilitate meetings, those types of things in order to be successful. And then the last pillar is retention. It's driving that employee engagement. It's working through those succession planning routines. It's measuring gains. And then the focus on continuous improvement. How do we continue to get better as a contractor, as a workforce, and as an industry? Next slide. So you heard in Daniel's presentation some talk about ROI and some metrics, and you know, our view was we're fully on board with those metrics, and we actually a number of years ago on a large EPC capital project in the greater Houston area worked with a client, and basically what we did is we said we want to perform and implement every aspect that we all talk about. So we revamped our recruiting, we implemented all aspects of our workforce development program, We started early in engineering. We implemented advanced work packaging, all of our safety protocols, revamped our onboarding. And we did this as Worley, but in conjunction with our client. And the outcome, you can see, I won't go through each of these kind of KPIs, but in an industry that was being plagued by absenteeism and high turnover and safety and some issues with safety performance and productivity, that project was actually delivered ahead of schedule and under budget with industry-leading turnover and absentee rates. And I think that's a credit to when you do all the things that we all know that we should do and we need to do very well, when you do them intentionally and you measure it and you track it, you can get the outcomes that we're talking about here today. Next. So that kind of leads us back to where we started, the labor risk management program that Daniel talked about with CURT. I'm happy to say that Worley was one of the first contractors. I think we might have been the first contractor to complete the CWDA process, the Workforce Development Assessment. And I guess timing's everything, because a little bit before we started our presentation, Daniel sent our results in, and happy to announce that we scored 100% on the CWDA process. So that's great. We're very proud of that, but there's always more work to be done. And I think that the timing's right for change. I think that what gets measured gets done. I think we need to keep focused on workforce issues, training, filling in the skill gap, dealing with productivity. And Daniel showed the chart of the retirements. If you look at the demographics within Worley, within the industry, you'll see that model of baby boomers retiring and that knowledge management issue that we have to deal with is real. And you know, the planning's already started within Worley for how we're going to deal with that as a contractor. And we're very proud of our program, and we're happy to be aligned with CURT and the labor risk management and supported in any way possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to Daniel and any questions anybody has. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Scott. And let me say, you know, I didn't know if Scott was going to announce that or not, but in that process that they went through around the CWDA, it was pretty rigorous. And I know for the folks that were part of that, they were asked tough questions to support claims that they were making. And as it turns out, they're doing an excellent job in what they're doing. And as Scott mentioned, there's always room for improvement, but just an excellent program. So thank you for sharing with us what you all are doing. Alex, thank you as well again. And Rob, I don't know if you have any questions in the chat box, or if we want to just open it up. Eddie, maybe you have some thoughts that you want to interject here, but we're open to any questions or any input from the folks on in this meeting.
I would like to say, Scott, that's very impressive, 100%. I'd be sticking my chest out a bit too if I was you.
Thanks a lot, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Are there any questions?
None.
Well, here's a question for you, Scott, just so people who are not familiar with the CWDA process. About how long would it take your team to complete it?
Well, I think we had some starts and stops, because I know that on the CURT side, they were updating the system and the process as we were going.
That's right.
I want to say it actually took about 6 to 7 weeks to go through it in total with some of those starts and stops. So it was it wasn't a first go around, wasn't an easy process, but the last few weeks, once the system updates took effect and we got all the feedback back, was much easier.
Yeah, let me just add on to that maybe just a little bit, Eddie. So for anybody who has some familiarity with the CWDA, it actually dates back, I think if I remember right, maybe 6 years, something like that. And so it's the Worley wasn't the first one to do it back then. But what we decided to do was to update the system and improve it and make a lot of changes to try to make it more effective and bring it make it a little bit more current. And so that process was completed more recently. And so one of the things that we asked Worley to do is said, hey, will you be the first one to kind of walk through this process? And so they did that. And in exchange for that, they gave us feedback, hey, this can be a little bit better. Maybe we ought to tweak that. And so the typical timeline for doing it is not like that. But they were able to help us be sort of the first user case on the new system. And so we are deeply appreciative of them being willing to be our guinea pig, so to speak, on that. But that's part of the reason for that timeline.
Well, I know I was involved in the original assessment tool development and also the most recent revisions to try to make it a little bit more user-friendly, and also take away any appearances of being biased toward any one labor posture. So I just want to encourage the contractors out there, regardless of your labor posture, to look into this. We think it'd be helpful for your company's success, and it definitely will help your engagement with workforce development.
Yeah, and a couple of the things I would add on that too is that you're exactly right. It is 100% labor posture neutral. It's also a rigorous process. So that was important to us. It was also important that there be as little or zero subjectivity, that it's as objective as it can possibly be. And so I think we've accomplished that. I'm not involved in that scoring process or that auditing or any of that. There's a team of folks doing that who have experience related to those particular types of contractors that are doing the assessment. And then the other thing I would add too, that I didn't talk about during the presentation, is that there's interest in doing this internationally, and so we are looking now at in the next few months even beginning to adapt this, so it's not just looking at and evaluating contractors based in the U.S., but actually various parts of the globe. And in particular, there's a lot of activity happening around the world in modularization, prefabrication, and shipping them back to the U.S. Good strategies for dealing with some of the workforce challenges, but it's important, obviously, if you're an owner, to understand there's risk associated with that as well. And that risk needs to be understood early and mitigated to the extent possible. And so we're thrilled that under this new scalable version of the CWDA 2.0, so to speak, we're looking forward to being able to do that now too. So that's an exciting new announcement that we're looking forward to.
Yeah, Daniel shared that with me a few weeks ago when we were speaking, and I was pleasantly surprised or happy that we're looking at that, because we look at modularization from an owner's perspective as a mitigation to deal with the workforce that we have here in the Gulf Coast. But as more and more work is modularized, there's more and more risk associated with that, as Daniel mentioned. So I think that's going to be a great next step and evolution of the process.
Good deal, guys. Y'all did a great job. Any questions or comments?
We answered them all.
Well, apparently so. Well, just overall, any feedback that could help us with these summits in the future that make it more beneficial to you? Put it in your chat box or speak up. We would appreciate your feedback. Thank you all for joining us today. I learned a lot, and I just think we had a great lineup of speakers. I also want to thank all the planning team that helped put this together too. It would all turn out real well.
Thank you to the CURT team. Eddie, thank you for hosting all of this as well. I know that takes a big chunk of your day to make that happen, but we appreciate it and very much appreciate your leadership and Ed Lukenbach Air Products leadership on the Workforce Development Committee.
Well, guys, if nothing else, then hope y'all have a great rest of your day, week. And those of you who are in potential harm's way, please take care of yourself and your families. And my thoughts and prayers be going out to you. So with that, y'all have a great day.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Great day. Stay safe.
Bye.